Chapter 397. This feeling of severing one's shackles and releasing one's potential was intoxicating. Chu Feng's body began to glow, especially his spine. A rain of divine and resplendent light soared up. He could see that his entire spine was golden in color and condensed into a dragon snake. It looked more like a spear and could fly out as long as Chu Feng willed it. However, he didn't dare experiment here because this was the revered 8 trigrams furnace. His constitution had improved, and his pores were gushing with golden radiance. He could exchange energy with the outside world. The evolution of his biological level was difficult to resist. Chu Feng felt as though he had ascended to immortality. So comfortable! He couldn't help but moan. He stood up and stretched his limbs. His whole body was erupting with golden radiance, and his every movement was filled with astonishing power. Next, I'm going to Mount Huang to pick herbs. There's a strange tree there with astonishing fruits. Unfortunately, I couldn't get close last time. Chu Feng's eyes were like 2 golden lamps shooting out beams of incomparably fiery light. He had seen an alluring path of evolution. Last time, he had brought the corporations and the descendants of extraterrestrials to explore Mount Qinling, Mount Zhongnan, and finally Mount Huang. There, he had discovered an old tree with resplendent fruit. Unfortunately, he couldn't break the domains in that area and couldn't pick the mutant fruit. It was quite regretful. This time, it was likely that no one would dare to go with him. Last time, the corporations and the North Pole people were simply too miserable. With him leading the way, death followed no matter where they went. In the end, those people all agreed that he was a swindler and a god of misfortune. Oh, I'll be able to evolve again after going to Mount Huang. This feeling is too wonderful. It's as if I'm about to become an immortal. Chu Feng was still reluctant to part with that feeling. Golden radiance erupted from his body. After severing his 8th shackle, his constitution was still gradually growing stronger. His whole body was filled with a golden mist and specks of light. He glanced down and saw that there were still 7 silver pills flickering like little stars. He knew they wouldn't be of much use to him. Mutant fruits of the same level could only allow one to evolve once. It was the same for pills refined into specks of light. The pollen and mutant fruits could accelerate the transformation of the constitution. Most importantly, there was a strange substance within that could stimulate the body and increase the activity of the cells. As for the strength of the energy contained in the pollen and the mutant fruit, that was not the most important. The key was the catalytic effect. Even though he had predicted it, Chu Feng still didn't give up. He took another silver pill, but it didn't have any effect on him. The Yellow Mountain, the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave at the North Pole, the Qilin's old lair, the ocean, all of these places have extraordinary medicinal effects. I can search for them. Chu Feng had set his goal. He desired to become stronger. He wanted to improve his physique and mental strength. The situation on Earth was complicated and getting more and more dangerous. Especially since he had once fought against the aliens, his situation was not good. There was only one way to survive, and that was to rapidly evolve and become stronger. Golyalo. Every time his physique skyrocketed, he would feel so hungry that his stomach would ache. This was because his body had used up too much energy. Chu Feng had already prepared for this. The food was simply too sumptuous. The meat of the Southern Sea Dragon race was absolutely delicious, and he ranked it first on the gourmet rankings. This place was the interior of the 8 trigrams furnace, so it was perfect for roasting dragon meat. Additionally, there were extraterrestrial tiger kidneys and rock meat stored in the spatial bottle. The meat hadn't been preserved for a long time, so its energy had yet to dissipate. In a short while, the fragrance of meat wafted out from the revered furnace and permeated thousands of meters away. Damn, what's that smell? I'm almost drooling. Don't tell me this demon king came here to enjoy the delicacies he cooked? Damn it. Outside, some people couldn't help but swallow their saliva after smelling the fragrance. It was too tempting. This time, Chu Feng's appetite didn't suffer. He had made ample preparations and had all the top 3 ingredients on the gourmet rankings. He had stewed, steamed, and barbecued them. He really didn't suffer any losses. An hour later, Chu Feng was satisfied and staggered to his feet. At the same time, he put away the star-like pills into a jade jar. He had no use for them, but he could give them to the Wudong Grandmaster and the others when the time came. This kind of medicinal pill flowing with silver splendor was a priceless treasure at present. It could allow one's strength to skyrocket. So much so that Chu Feng wanted to make another trip to Eternal Island to see if he could contact the Yellow Cattle. He wanted to deliver it to them. There's no rush. There are many mutant fruits in the world. I'll go pick them and refine them in the revered 8 trigrams furnace. I guarantee there'll be enough. Chu Feng pondered for a moment. A mutant fruit that could allow one to sever 6 shackles, along with some dragon blood grass, toad blood, and rock blood, would allow one to sever 8 shackles. Let's go find fruits with stronger medicinal effects. Chu Feng tidied up the 8 trigrams furnace and got rid of all traces. Then, he slowly walked out. He spread out his divine instincts and glanced at the surrounding shrubs. He was disappointed because no big fish had appeared. Be it the corporations or the extraterrestrials, they were all too cautious. There were people and mutant beasts in the vicinity, but they were all small shrimps in charge of surveillance. There were even some detectors. What a pity! Why isn't anyone here? He muttered to himself with a regretful expression. His expression was seen by others and also captured by the detectors. Everyone's expressions darkened at this moment, be it the corporations or the people from other powers. The group of people cursed. Damn your grandpa! This damned bastard really didn't have any good ideas. Chu Feng's fiery eyes scanned the area and confirmed that there were no super-evolved beings in the vicinity. He then shattered all the detectors and scared away the small shrimp. Following that, he approached the area of the essence flames of extreme yang with the diamond chakram in hand and attempted to absorb it. That was because the diamond chakram had become even more sparkling and translucent after this refinement. A number of natural patterns had formed within it, making it even more extraordinary. As for how extraordinary it was, he would have to test it in actual combat. However, the diamond chakram's original function was to absorb energy and become incomparably heavy, capable of breaking through all things. Chu Feng was prepared to collect some essence flames of extreme yang and, if possible, some essence flames of extreme yin. He wanted to see if he could store them for a long time. These 2 types of essence flames were special types of energy. Ah, it can really be absorbed. Not bad. Chu Feng was astonished. The diamond chakram was snow-white and became increasingly translucent. Its aura became even more extraordinary after absorbing the essence flames. It was almost like a crude version of a sex ancestor's weapon. He felt that this so-called ultimate trash weapon would give him a pleasant surprise in the future. Following which, Chu Feng tried using the diamond chakram to absorb some essence flames of extreme yin. In the end, he was burned until he fled frantically. His face was ashen and the area almost exploded. The essence flames of extreme yin and extreme yang were like fire and water. They would erupt whenever they came into contact with the diamond chakram, burning Chu Feng until he was crying out in pain. In the distance, the people who were paying attention didn't know what was happening. They all wore odd expressions. What was this demon King Chu up to? Chu Feng cursed continuously as he changed out of his tattered and charred clothes. He gave up on one of the flame essences and only absorbed one. Doubtlessly, these 2 types of flame essences were special types of energy with astonishing destructive power. Even that unfathomable old Taoist couldn't withstand it and was almost burned to death. Chu Feng weighed it in his hand and found that the diamond chakram was now at least tens of thousands of kilograms. This item would mysteriously become heavier after absorbing energy. This was still inexplicable. He didn't dare continue absorbing for fear of accident. This was, after all, a super energy essence of extreme yang. If it were to explode on his body, even his spirit would be burned away. In the end, he carefully placed the diamond chakram into the pristine jade bottle. Chu Feng found a mountain spring and took a bath. Afterwards, he leisurely walked out and headed toward Jiangning City. These people are too cautious. Can't they give me a chance to perform? Not a single big fish actually came, Chu Feng mumbled regretfully. He fished out his communicator from the spatial bottle and looked at it. His expression changed as he received some news. Then, he saw a lot of news. There were figures of descenders in the folded spaces of various famed mountains. They were about to arrive in large numbers? So much so that a deity from the west had descended and successfully crossed over. Don't tell me it's Yamen and Abel's master? The one who bewitched Schiller. Chu Feng frowned. These were troubled times. He knew that the great changes on earth were about to begin. A large number of descenders, divine sons, saintesses, Buddhas, and princesses, were likely to appear together, following which, he gazed at the warnings from his old friends on the communicator. They had told him some of the warnings which caused his expression to turn solemn. There's nothing to be afraid of as long as I can evolve rapidly and become stronger. Chu Feng returned and observed his surroundings carefully. After confirming that there was no ambush, he rushed toward Jiangning City. He was quite relaxed. Although he had realized that the era of chaos was about to begin, the joy of his recent evolution and increase in strength hadn't faded yet. Hence, he was still in a good mood. Suddenly, he took a step forward on the way into the city. The mist around him surged as he stepped into a domain. Swoosh! Chu Feng stomped on the ground and retreated abruptly. This was a small domain and wasn't very impressive. It couldn't trap him. But the fact that someone was ambushing him was the most serious problem. He was feeling quite regretful just now, but in the end, retribution had come. Someone really did come with ill intentions. Boom! There was a great explosion in the surroundings. It wasn't from firearms but from a number of entities. The aura they emitted was too powerful and formed an energy tempest which tore the earth apart. Many nearby trees were uprooted and many millstone-sized rocks flew into the air in all directions. The scene was terrifying. These entities had concealed their auras with that small domain and had suddenly appeared to intercept him. The domain wasn't there to trap him but to hide those entities. They appeared from all directions and surrounded Chu Feng. "Who are you people?" asked Chu Feng. "Oh, your guide." A veiled lady with a graceful figure and a pair of large, lively eyes appeared. She looked quite moving. "What do you mean?" Chu Feng frowned. "We're a prince from a certain dynasty of evolvers in the outer realms who cherishes talent. We also feel that you're not bad and want to take you with us to pay our respects to the prince," said Huang Weiwei with a smile. "Cherishes talent? Pay our respects to him?" Chu Feng glanced sideways at them. This was completely due to the toad Ouyang Feng's influence. "Yes, you're not bad. You're a talent. Let's go." Huang Weiwei wore a smile on her face. Her expression was somewhat reserved and there was even a hint of hidden disdain. Chapter 398. Chu Feng's gaze became even more askance after hearing these words. This was a typical toad style of not looking at people straight in the eye. He had already been seriously infected. Huang Weiwei was originally smiling, but now her expression froze. She had actually received this kind of sidelong glance. The other party actually had this kind of reaction after hearing her words. Was he looking down on her? In truth, she had been smiling when facing Chu Feng before, but there was actually mockery in the depths of her eyes. It was just that she didn't show it clearly. But now, she suddenly discovered that the other party was also treating her in the same manner. "What do you mean?" One of the nearby creatures spoke. He was very sensitive to Chu Feng's sidelong glance. His entire body was dark red with a row of sinister bony spikes growing out from his back. "Sorry, my eyes have been feeling uncomfortable recently," Chu Feng spoke. He looked at the group with great interest. The creature who had spoken just now, apart from his dark red skin and the row of bony spikes growing out of his spine, was quite similar to a human. "Don't tell me you're all descenders?" Chu Feng asked. "Ha, correct answer. Come with us, your talents won't be buried." Huang Weiwei laughed, but in her heart, she had already sentenced him to death. She was certain he wouldn't have a good ending. At this time, even though Chu Feng had severed 8 shackles, he still gave off a feeling of no threat. He hadn't been exposed. "To be honest, I'm indeed a bit tempted, but I don't know much about you guys or that prince. Can you introduce him to me?" Chu Feng smiled and no longer looked at them out of the corner of his eyes. "You'll know everything after you meet the prince," Han Wenze said, his expression calm. Chu Feng immediately felt that this person looked familiar. There was a young man from celestial biology called Han Fei who had tried to assassinate Chu Feng in secret. In the end, he was killed by Han Wenze. That young man called Han Fei looked quite similar to Han Wenze. Moreover, there was also a cluster of dark red patterns between his brows. Chu Feng immediately understood many things. "Has that prince crossed over?" Chu Feng asked with an odd expression. Han Wenze's expression was calm. He glanced at Chu Feng in astonishment, feeling a little wary. This young man was actually so perceptive, directly beginning to probe them. "Let's go. I'll take you to see him," Han Wenze said. Chu Feng feigned ignorance and conversed with them, hoping to learn more about the situation. However, these people wore cold smiles and did not reveal any valuable information. Their mouths were quite tight. "Did you descend on Earth 22 years ago? Have you been sleeping in the Origin magnetic cave in the North Pole or lurking near the Qilin's old nest?" Chu Feng asked. He didn't expect to get a response, but he could make some judgments by observing their expressions. "You talk too much," the creature with dark red body and bone spikes on its back said coldly. "I'm just curious. Right, is that dynasty of evolvers very powerful?" Chu Feng kept asking questions. Huang Weiwei said with a smile, "The orthodoxy of the dynasty of evolvers is unimaginable, and their prince is naturally dazzling. He can achieve super evolution and become someone above all. It's our honor to be able to follow such a person." Chu Feng was filled with disgust and disgust. He didn't want to probe any further. "Come with us to have an audience with the prince," Han Wenze said. Chu Feng's heart was filled with loathing after hearing this, but he put on a hesitant expression. Huang Weiwei narrowed her eyes after seeing this. Her lips curled into a mocking smile. In any case, she was masked and didn't need to worry about the other party noticing. "How troublesome. Just take him away," said the dark red creature with a row of bone spikes on its back. "Fine, I'll go with you to take a look." Chu Feng walked forward. After a few steps, he erupted with his full power and suddenly launched a killing move. Chu Feng was so fast that no one could react. Sand and pebbles flew about amidst terrifying sonic booms. He used the demon ox fist and blasted toward the bone spikes on its back. The creature roared in anger and raised his hand to slap forward. At the same time, his back lit up and the bone spikes were about to fly out. He wanted to pierce through Chu Feng's body. However, Chu Feng's fist was simply too fast. He had launched a preemptive strike without holding back at all. How could he give the creature a chance? Boom! This fist was too tyrannical and revealed its true form. A black ox charged out from his fist imprint and strode forward with its head held high. It was as if it was walking through the starry skies amidst the resplendent starlight. The fist struck its target, breaking the creature's right arm and piercing through its chest. Its body was immediately torn to pieces and exploded into a large pool of blood. "Too weak," Chu Feng said. This was an entity with 8 severed shackles, and was at the same level as him. However, it had been blasted to death, just like that. Huang Weiwei screamed in fear of being drenched in blood. She was a neat freak and quickly retreated. In addition to Huang Weiwei and Han Wenze, there was also a man with a silver horn on his head and a middle-aged man with a scorpion tail on his back. Now, the 4 of them had moved at the same time. Each of them attacked to kill Chu Feng. Swoosh! Chu Feng charged out of the encirclement through the opening he had just made like a ghost. He turned around and ran madly towards Mount Zhijin. That was because this place was too close to Jiangning City. If a battle were to break out, he was afraid the people in the city would be affected. "Where do you think you're going?" The 4 furiously chased after him. They were descenders from the Qilin's old lair. It was quite shameful to lose one of them in the blink of an eye. Chu Feng was shaken. Apart from the one he had killed, the remaining 4 were all experts with 9 severed shackles. Their lineup was quite powerful. They really did think highly of him to form such a team to kill him. If he hadn't just broken through in the revered 8 trigrams furnace and severed his 8th shackle, he would have been in trouble. Logically speaking, the evolvers on Earth shouldn't be able to stop the joint attack of several extraterrestrials. But Chu Feng was fearless. His level of evolution was slightly lower than the 4, and he had 1 severed shackle less. But this wasn't a problem for him. He had always been able to subdue evolvers of a higher level. He had grasped a supreme breathing technique and was in peak condition. His combat strength was far superior to ordinary people. So much so that Chu Feng suspected that this trend would become even more astonishing as his constitution continued to improve. "Chu Feng, you really deserve to die." Huang Weiyue's expression was gloomy from behind. The air exploded. These people were all experts and chased after him like lightning. "Stop!" Han Wenze waved his hand and stopped in his tracks. He didn't give chase because he had actually arrived at Mount Zhijin. He was very cautious, afraid that Chu Feng would use his domains. Chu Feng had also stopped in his tracks. This place was far from the city, and he could take action without fear of harming the innocent. Many people in Jiangning had heard the commotion just now, especially the death of experts outside the city. Many people were rushing over. "Chu Feng, you've made a grave mistake. Let's go and meet the genius prince. Ask him to forgive you," Han Wenze said. In truth, he really wanted to kill Chu Feng with a single palm and get rid of this troublemaker. But Mu Qing had a request. She wanted to capture Chu Feng alive and make him kneel at the prince's feet. Chu Feng said, "You look somewhat familiar. I once killed a person called Han Fei. He had a dark red pattern between his brows just like you. What's the relationship between the 2 of you?" Han Wenze's expression was incomparably gloomy. That was his illegitimate child from Earth. The dark red pattern between their brows was a unique mark of their race. It was rumored that after evolving to a higher level, the dark red pattern would possess great power. "You're courting death!" Han Wenze shouted loudly. Regardless of whether he cared about Han Fei's life or death, Chu Feng's provocation was intolerable. Chu Feng shot him a sidelong glance with a face full of smiles. He took a few steps back and entered Mount Zhijin's domain. He didn't want to take advantage of the terrain here, and only wanted to say a few more words. But he lost interest after glancing at Han Wenze and no longer paid him any attention. Chu Feng glanced at Huang Weiwei and said, "You're a descender. Can you be considered a saintess?" Huang Weiwei was astonished and her expression was odd. This brat was still in the mood to ask such a question at a time like this. "Relatively speaking, my sect can be considered one," she said. That sect was very small, and if compared to other orthodoxies, it really couldn't be considered much. "You really are?" Chu Feng was astonished. Then he took action. He took the initiative to kill his way out of Mount Zhijin's domain. Han Wenze's eyes were cold and Huang Weiwei also revealed killing intent. As for the other two, there was no need to even mention them. They went all out to capture him alive. However, the four of them were greatly alarmed after exchanging blows. Chu Feng's strength was simply too terrifying. Their perlicues were bleeding and their bodies were shaken after the clash. Earlier, they were astonished when that expert with only 8 severed shackles died, but they weren't afraid because they could do the same. But now they were all frightened. What was this situation? He was actually so ferocious even when fighting 1 against 4. Thump! After an intense exchange, Chu Feng attacked with lightning speed and almost captured Huang Weiwei. With a ripping sound, he tore off a section of her sleeves and left a few bloody marks on her arm. Boom! Following which, he forced back the scorpion-tailed man and beat up the silver-horned man until he coughed up large mouthfuls of blood. Following which, Chu Feng soared into the air and pounced towards Huang Weiwei. He had made up his mind to capture her. Chu Feng's silhouettes flipped through the air as he pushed them back. At the same time, he rushed forward and, with a final bang, landed a punch on Huang Weiwei's body. She coughed up large mouthfuls of blood as a gaping hole appeared on her body. She almost exploded. Her veil was torn to shreds and, at the same time, she was grabbed by Chu Feng. "Someone like you is also a saintess?" Chu Feng feigned astonishment. Judging from his expression, Huang Weiwei's face was green with anger even though she had been captured. "Aren't saintesses usually 16 years old? I think you're definitely 28 or 38. Liar." His attitude almost made Huang Weiwei's lungs explode. She was a woman and a whore. She was indeed no longer young, but being ridiculed like this was intolerable. All of a sudden, Chu Feng's hair stood on end as he retreated with Huang Weiwei in tow. At the critical moment, Han Wenze finally used his trump card. Taking advantage of Chu Feng's distraction, he took out the spirit binding rope. He had been waiting for an opportunity. Ever since he had personally experienced how terrifying Chu Feng was, he knew that he could only rely on this secret weapon. At the critical moment, he could turn the situation around with a single strike. The spirit binding rope looked like a hemp rope with a faint golden luster. It wasn't very eye-catching, but now it was swimming rapidly after landing on the ground. It was like a dragon rising and falling as it charged toward Chu Feng. Most importantly, it was simply too fast. Chu Feng was alarmed. He had a feeling that if he was really entangled by this rope, he would most likely be in big trouble. This was his trump card. Bang! He directly threw the saintess in his hand towards the strange hemp rope. Huang Weiwei screamed miserably as her whole body was smashed to the ground. She crashed into the faint golden hemp rope and was seriously injured. The hemp rope first glowed with golden light as it entangled her and directly broke half of her body. "Han Wenze!" She screamed in fear, roaring angrily. Han Wenze's forehead was drenched in sweat. The spirit binding rope had automatically chased after its prey after being activated. It was somewhat out of control, and reality was no longer under his control. This hemp rope seemed to have a special spirituality. Swoosh! After breaking Huang Weiwei's body, the spirit binding rope soared up once again and charged towards Chu Feng like a golden snake with its head raised. It was as fast as lightning. Chu Feng immediately used the diamond chakram because he had sensed that this hemp rope was a secret treasure. It was extremely demonic and should have been refined by a powerhouse among the evolved beings. This time, he didn't just smash it with force. Instead, he used it skillfully to activate the essence flames of extreme yang absorbed by the snow-white bracelet. Whoosh! The flames danced as the essence of extreme yang blossomed with blinding light. This was a high-grade energy. The essence flames of extreme yang drowned out the hemp rope. In an instant, the light golden rope was burned apart. This! Han Wenze was astonished. This weapon known to be able to easily suppress those at the shackled realm was destroyed just like that? Boom! The next moment, Chu Feng struck out with the diamond chakram. His target was him. This time, the diamond chakram was incomparably resplendent. Not only was it as heavy as a mountain, but it also erupted with essence flames of extreme yang. At such a close distance, Han Wenza had no way to evade and was directly struck. The scene was somewhat terrifying. His body was first blasted apart and then engulfed by the essence flames of extreme yang. With a swoosh, he turned into a pile of ashes, destroyed in both body and soul. This scene frightened Huang Weiwei badly. Thump! Chu Feng rushed over and stomped on the upper half of her body, which was dripping with blood. No! She cried out in terror. However, everything was too late. She was crushed into pieces by a single foot and died a violent death. Boom! The next moment Chu Feng brandished his fist. Surging blood energy enveloped the remaining two experts like a raging ocean. There was no suspense at all. Within a short period of time, the middle-aged man with the scorpion tail was blasted apart and turned into a bloody mist. "Don't kill me!" the other cried out. "Speak. You know what I want to ask," shouted Chu Feng. A moment later, with a boom, he blew up the silver-horned man as well. Chu Feng felt that he hadn't even used his full strength. After severing his 8th shackle, it was quite easy for him to deal with several extraterrestrials with 9 severed shackles. This was the result of his evolution. Chapter 399. Chapter 399. Hunting the Qilin in the west. Chu Feng's eyes were a faint golden color, burning with passion. He was preparing to go to the Qilin's old lair. Before setting out, he cleaned up the traces of battle at the scene. Everything is fake in this era. Even saintesses are like this. What 16 years of age, stunning beauty, and slender waist. Their real age is at least 50, Chu Feng complained. He felt that Huang Weiwei had taken good care of herself. She had descended to Earth for 22 years, but her age was probably at the level of a grandmother. He recalled his original intention of hunting fairies and goddesses. He had even said that he would capture them to warm his bed. Now, he couldn't help but shiver. A 50 or 60-year-old saintess. It was better to forget it and politely decline. If they were all people of this generation, he wouldn't hunt them even if he was beaten to death. He would just run away. "I'm cracking down on fakes." After cleaning up the scene, Chu Feng carried the diamond chakram to the mountain where the essence flames of extreme yang were being nurtured and began to absorb the special yang energy there. In today's battle, this kind of rare high-grade energy had displayed astonishing effect. It was worth making more preparations. Afterwards, he set out. The current Chu Feng possessed godly speed. He could absolutely swim in the North Sea in the morning and travel in the evening. His feet were enough. In ancient times, he could already be considered an immortal on the land. Although he couldn't fly, he could traverse the continent and sea in a single day. Chu Feng left Jiangning and headed north toward the Qilin's old lair. Not long ago, the man with the silver horn on his head didn't reveal much information. That was because he had already seen that Chu Feng was determined to kill him, but at the last moment, he became unyielding. He had mentioned Mount Lao not because he wanted to leak information. His true goal was to send Chu Feng to his death, because he was convinced that the heavenly prince would beat Chu Feng to death. As he saw it, this was an irreversible gap. People from the imperial court of evolvers possessed terrifying talents and could achieve the most terrifying super-evolution. On the way, Chu Feng was as fast as lightning. He was heading north toward a certain place in Shandong. That was because he had determined that the Qilin's lair was there. At the last moment, when that creature mentioned the Qilin nest, it was secretive and didn't reveal everything. It was clear that it wanted to trick Chu Feng. A fake nest is most likely filled with traps and dangers, while a real nest is definitely a tiger's den. A while ago, Chu Feng was researching domains and had read various documents. Out of curiosity, he had researched the legendary dragon caves in the sea, Qilin nests on land, and phoenix nests on parasol trees in China. Thus, he had already made some deductions. Now, combined with some of the information leaked by that creature, he could now accurately determine where the Qilin's old nest was. In the historical records, it was recorded that in the spring of the 14th year of Duke Aigong of Lu, when he hunted in the west, Shusan's carriage key was found. He thought it was an ominous sign, and Zhong and I called it a Qilin. In this incident there was a monarch, a Qilin, and a literature saint. It's obvious how terrifying the situation is, Chu Feng said to himself. Similar records could be found in the Zhuozhuan. Unfortunately, although it was an auspicious beast, it had perished in that incident. There was a line in the spring and autumn annals, hunting a death Qilin in the west. From this, Chu Feng understood the location of the ancient Qilin. In addition to the information he had obtained from the descender just now, he was naturally able to confirm that there was no mistake. Hunting in the west, this place mentioned in the historical records was called Day Marsh, also known as the Giant Wild Marsh. It was located in the Shandong region and was also known as Hezi. This place is also the birthplace of the most powerful tribe in ancient times. Chu Feng pondered. This Day Marsh had once birthed a mythical tribe, and there was indeed a reason why the Qilin lived nearby. That was the totem of the forebears. Chu Feng's speed was extremely fast. He traversed the entire way with explosive speed. If he were to come into contact with any rocks, vegetation, or other substances, they would all explode. After the great upheavals, Jiangning was over 6,000 kilometers away from Hezi in Shandong. However, Chu Feng had arrived in half an hour after running frantically. This kind of godly speed, this kind of crazy running, if witnessed and known by others, would all be stupefied. It was somewhat frightening. The exact location was north of Hezi's giant wild marsh. Chu Feng arrived. The terrain had changed greatly and was completely different from the past. He had come here before the upheavals, and now that he was here again, he revealed an astonished expression. This was a primitive landscape. Ancient trees towered into the sky, and a great marsh surged with water vapor. It stretched as far as the eye could see. It's really strange. The landscape of this place had changed too completely. Chu Feng treated it cautiously. He thought of the various legends of this place and didn't dare to be careless. There's a saying in the classic of mountains and seas that Yendi's daughter Jingwei used stones to fill the sea. The sea mentioned is Day Marsh. He stopped here. In front of him was a great lake covered in hazy clouds and mist. It was boundlessly large. On the shore, old vines twisted about and fierce beasts roared. Primitive birds flew across the sky, and a giant bird directly grabbed a long-nosed elephant and flew into the distance. It was extremely savage and terrifying. Chu Feng suspected that he had entered the wrong territory and had mistakenly entered a foreign land. The folded spaces in other places had a transitional stage, starting from the Great Mountains. This place was completely different. It directly displayed the ancient land and the boundless Great Marsh. Swoosh! Chu Feng was as light as a feather, but his movements were extremely fast. He moved along the lake, searching this ancient land where the most powerful tribes had been born. Fortunately, he was fast. Otherwise, ordinary people wouldn't be able to see the end of such a large place even after walking for several months. They could only circle around the Great Marsh. While Chu Feng was searching for the Qilin's old lair, the outside world couldn't remain calm. That was because blood had once flowed on Mount Zhijin, and Demon King Chu was suspected to have fought there. Just who had he tricked? Extra. Chu Feng is suspected to have killed extraterrestrials again. When they heard these words, everyone was speechless. The word again, how could it be so cruel? I knew he's a god of misfortune. We can't have anything to do with him. Death follows wherever he goes. Whoever comes into contact with him with bad intentions will suffer greatly. Some corporate members sighed. This was a lesson learned through blood and tears. Even though they didn't oppose each other last time and cooperated in a friendly manner, Many people had died along the way as Chu Feng led them to Mount Qinling, Mount Zhongnan, and Mount Huang. On Mount Lao, someone reported to Mu Qin, "There seems to be a situation over at Jiangning. There's no rush." Mu Qin was drinking tea. She was calm and composed, unlike the style of a maid. Her countenance was beautiful, and her eyes were deep. She sat at the stone table in the bamboo forest, calm and tranquil. At this time, there was no longer the amiable smile on her face. She was somewhat apathetic as she finally put down the teacup and said, "Be it the natives or the descenders, they are all clay chickens and pottery dogs to the prince." Beside the great marsh, Chu Feng was searching and found some clues. That was because he was a domain researcher. He could observe the topography of the mountains and explore the chi of the earth. He could accurately grasp the areas with high energy density and spiritual nature. He corrected them along the way and advanced along the correct path. After crossing a swamp and passing through a stone forest filled with giant vines, he finally arrived at a plain. Chu Feng knew he had come to the right place. He was already close to the Qilin's old lair. The plain was overflowing with white mist. This was the immortal mist of ancient legends. It was actually a type of energy substance that was extremely beneficial to living beings. Staying in such an energy-rich environment all year round would naturally prolong one's lifespan. For evolvers, it would also greatly strengthen their physique. No wonder it's an old lair. The Qilin had long since abandoned this place. An earth-shattering battle had erupted here and destroyed this place, leaving behind only ruins. Chu Feng frowned. If that was the case, then this place definitely wasn't as heaven-defying as the true dragon's lair under the Eastern Sea. Otherwise, it would be another astonishing land of fortune. That's not right. It's not completely destroyed. There are ancient domains covering it. This place isn't simple. Chu Feng was quite cautious. He tensed up his body and sealed his pores, not letting a single wisp of his aura seep out. He entered the white mist and approached the pure land within the plain. There were ancient tribal ruins here. There were huge piles of ashes, collapsed city walls, and many beast bones. All of them were telling of the desolate times of the past. But there were quite a number of highly evolved beings in that era. Some of them were even close to gods. I was too careless. Chu Feng's heart trembled. He hadn't even approached the Qilin's old lair and was just passing through the ruins when someone discovered that it was a stone man. It was originally silent and motionless. There wasn't even any spiritual energy seeping out of it. It was just like a dead object. Even someone as powerful as Chu Feng's divine instincts couldn't sense that this was a living entity. He had completely ignored it. Now, it suddenly opened its eyes. Its stone eyelids moved and immediately revealed two incomparably resplendent silver beams of light. A terrifying energy aura erupted in an instant. "You dare trespass on the Qilin's holy land? You're courting death." This was an extremely tyrannical entity. It was also a descender. Because it could remain motionless all year round and was able to blend in well with nature, it was in charge of guarding the passage outside the Qilin's old lair. Although it stayed in the outer regions all year round, its status couldn't be considered low. In fact, it was even higher than many extraterrestrials. Normally, whenever there was fortune, it would definitely share in it. This was a powerful expert. Chu Feng's heart trembled. This stone man was covered in dust and its body was made of old stone. At this time, it directly leapt up and pounced towards him. It even opened its mouth to whistle to warn him. Chu Feng reacted quickly. He leapt up and threw himself over as if he were throwing his life away. He met this powerful stone man head-on. Swoosh! The next moment the two of them disappeared. Chu Feng had dragged it into the pristine jade bottle because he was afraid it would alarm the Qilin's lair. Bang, 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 the fierce battle erupted. This stone man was extremely powerful with 9 severed shackles. Apart from its stony exterior, its body was surging with blood energy. It had 5 viscera and 6 bowels, blood, and even a spiritual magnetic field. This kind of life form was very special and powerful. Its combat strength alone was even greater than Han Wenze, Huang Weiwei, and the others combined. Its blood energy surged as it roared. If it wasn't for the fact that it was inside the spatial bottle, it would have surged to the skies. It was enough to shake a mountain into pieces and blast a whole forest into smithereens. Its strength was extraordinary. But at this time, Chu Feng had long since severed his 8th shackle. His astonishing strength after his evolution was on full display. He was simply like a primordial beast. Bang, 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 he faced the stone man head-on, continuously exchanging blows, directly fighting it head-on, forcibly suppressing this special life form. Boom! In the end, he blasted the stone man into pieces. An astonishing blood energy pervaded the air and caused the spatial bottle to shake violently. It was extremely terrifying. The pristine jade bottle was sturdy enough to withstand it. Chu Feng had done some experiments before, so he wasn't too worried. After 2 rounds of refinement by the revered 8 trigrams furnace, part of the seal on the spatial bottle had been undone. The space inside was over 1,000 cubic meters. With a flash, Chu Feng appeared above the ancient ruins. He was astonished to find a lizard-like monster with a pair of meaty wings in the distance. It was flapping its wings and piercing through the mist as it flew over at great speed. It seemed to have sensed something unusual. It looked like a western dragon, but it was definitely not one. It was exuding a vicious aura as it swooped down to investigate the area. This was another sentinel in the vicinity who was guarding the path to the Qilin's old lair. Chu Feng bowed and went all out. An energy spear flew out from his back. It was simply too terrifying and indestructible. This was a special ability bestowed upon him after severing his shackle. There was a golden energy spear nurtured there that resembled a dragon or serpent. In order to end the battle quickly, this was the first time Chu Feng had used this trump card in combat. He had tested it along the way and found that its power was astonishing. It was simply too fast. The dragon or serpent soared into the air, and the peerless divine spear flew out abruptly. It directly pierced through the creature's lower jaw and then through its skull. Blood sprayed out in all directions as the sinister and ferocious-looking extraterrestrial fell to the ground. With a swoosh, Chu Feng rushed over and caught it with the pristine jade bottle before putting it away. A one-hit kill. The ambush was a success. Chu Feng was very satisfied with the results of this evolution. His strength had increased explosively after severing his 8th shackle, and killing extraterrestrials wasn't too strenuous. Hence, he desired to evolve once again. After passing through this area, he saw the ruins of the Qilin's lair in the depths of the plains. It was suffused with white mist and giant rocks. Moreover, he saw an old tree just outside the lair with a number of golden fruits hanging on it. They hadn't fully ripened yet, but the fragrance of medicine was already pervading the air. A mutant fruit that can allow one to sever 6 shackles. He was astonished. And this was only the outskirts. Chu Feng believed that there were even more astonishing mutant trees in the depths of the Qilin's lair. For the quickest and most error-free novel reading, please visit Chapter 400. Chapter 400. Chapter 400. The Qilin's former lair. Giant rocks lay in disarray in front of him. This place was like a stone formation suffused with white mist. It would be easy to get lost if one were to charge in rashly. This was the Qilin's former lair, the former residence of the auspicious beast. Chu Feng wandered around the place. It was quite large and occupied a vast area. There were giant rocks and small rocks piled up together in clusters. This place was simply like a labyrinth, because regardless of whether it was the boulders or the clusters of rocks, many of them were similar. Together with the special energy substance, Immortal mist that surged continuously. Ordinary people would definitely lose their sense of direction if they walked in. Chu Feng was sure that there were domains within. The interior of this place was like a natural ghostly labyrinth. Evolvers would be trapped if they weren't careful. The Qilin's former lair was half destroyed, but the damaged domains and large areas of stone piled up here were still full of mysteries. There are a lot of extraterrestrials here. Chu Feng walked around in a circle and sensed wave after wave of vital magnetic field. This area of giant rocks and rubble was about the size of a giant city. Just the periphery was filled with mutant trees and fruit. Among them, there were some that could allow one to sever their sixth shackle. The Qilin's lair is indeed rich in natural resources. Chu Feng sighed. But now it had been occupied by the Descenders. A group of extraterrestrials had been hiding here for a long time. Doubtlessly, there were great fortunes in the depths of this divine beast lair. Otherwise, they wouldn't have stayed here and refused to leave. If they only wanted to sleep, they could always find a good place to do so. Chu Feng moved stealthily and drifted into the rubble like a specter. He was now approaching the lair. The place was indeed quite large with numerous rubble piles and dense mist. Moreover, he could see a thatched cottage or stone house every 1,000 meters. All of them were inhabited by extraterrestrials. There were also mutant trees growing near some of the stone houses. What a good place! Chu Feng sighed inwardly. This area was even more powerful than those famed mountains. At the very least, it had recovered to a higher degree at this stage. The medicinal herbs and mutant trees were all overflowing with vitality. The deeper he went, the greater the energy density, and the more luxuriant the mutant trees became. Up until now, Chu Feng had discovered more than 10 residences, which also meant that there were more than 10 Descenders, and this was only the tip of the iceberg. He shivered. The number of aliens who had come to Earth in the past 22 years was really not small. However, they had remained silent for so many years. They could really endure it. It seems like some of these Descenders know about domains and have effectively avoided some dangerous areas. Chu Feng discovered that wherever there were domains, there were no thatched cottages or stone houses. It was very spacious with only a few mutant trees growing. In some places, the mutant trees were full of fruits, the fragrance assailing the nostrils, but no one went to pick them. Chu Feng was tempted, but he didn't dare to act rashly. That's... His pupils constricted. There was a region where the white fog was very thick. There were no rocks, and it was very spacious. There were no aliens either. There was a snow-white bamboo forest there. There was an old bamboo that was extremely thick, snow-white like jade. There was a bunch of fruits on it that looked like a bunch of mutton fat grape. It was truly odd. There was only one old bamboo in the entire bamboo forest that had produced fruits like a bunch of white grape. The fragrance it emitted was extremely refreshing. This bunch of fruits can help one sever at least 7 shackles, Chu Feng judged. His eyes were burning with passion as he immediately put his thoughts into action. He walked step by step into the forest. He knew this place was very dangerous. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so spacious and devoid of extraterrestrials. But riches were sought amidst danger. He longed to evolve and wanted to pick that string of mutton fat fruit. Apparently, this string of fruits, together with the thunderstruck wood and toad blood, was enough to refine a batch of treasured medicine in the revered 8 trigrams furnace. It would allow him to sever his 9th shackle and evolve once more. As long as he could pick that string of snow-white fruits on this old bamboo, Chu Feng's trip wouldn't have been in vain. He could retire after accomplishing his mission. It was worth the risk to refine treasured medicine and allow him to evolve. Chu Feng approached and entered the bamboo forest. Within moments, he felt the world spin around him. Even as a domain researcher, he was terrified. The domains here were somewhat frightening. He had just entered and almost lost himself. It could interfere with one's spiritual magnetic field. Swoosh! Chu Feng carved magnetic stones and tossed them in all directions. Within moments, the white mist in the area became even denser and engulfed him and the bamboo forest. Chu Feng hid his traces. He was worried that the extraterrestrials would discover him. Afterwards, he sat down on the ground and sensed the earth energy in detail. He wanted to find a safe path and walk directly to that old bamboo. Before long, his face turned slightly pale. This area was a corner of the Qilins' lair covered by a damaged domain. It was extremely dangerous. Chu Feng believed that one wrong step would consign him to eternal damnation. This bamboo forest could destroy one's physical body and erase one's spirit. It's extremely dangerous. Chu Feng sighed. He felt somewhat distressed. He had a premonition that this string of snow-white fruits would be difficult to pick, but he didn't want to give up. He wanted to try. If he could really pick it and bring it back to refine medicine, his strength would increase explosively. Now that the world was in chaos and descenders were appearing continuously, nothing was more important than one's own strength in order to deal with the crisis. 1 day, 2 days, Chu Feng studied here for several days with a frown. He couldn't open up a path, because this was a corner of the Qilins' lair. Even if it was crippled, there were still unknown dangers. On Mount Lao, Mu Qing was standing on the peak of a mountain. Her white clothes danced in the wind as she gazed at the vast blue ocean below. Her fair and beautiful face was quite calm. "Fairy, we've confirmed several times that Han Wenze and Huang Weiyue are dead. They died on Mount Zhijin in Jiangning. It seems they were killed by the domains. Someone came to report that the upper echelons of celestial biology had submitted to Mu Qing in just a few days and were doing their best to work for her." Stupid. Mu Qing didn't turn back. This was her evaluation of Huang Weiyue and the others. She had known that something had happened to them several days ago but didn't take any action. Chu Feng's attainments in domains are astonishing. If this goes on, he will become a disaster in the future. His progress is too fast, said Mu Qinghe. There were 2 major powers in celestial biology, the Mu family and the Lin family. Now, a maid of a heaven-chosen prince had successfully crossed over and unexpectedly had the same surname as the Mu family. An important figure of the Mu family, Mu Qinghe, had immediately submitted. "It's not necessarily a domain strangulation," Mu Qing said indifferently. "Is Chu Feng so powerful that he can already fight several experts with 9 severed shackles? But there are indeed traces of domains being activated in that area," Mu Qing has said in a low voice. Mu Qing didn't pay attention to his words and said to herself, "This Chu Feng is quite patient. I've been waiting for him on Mount Lao for 4 days and he actually hasn't appeared." Mu Qinghe's expression turned cold. This woman was really calm. Was she waiting for Chu Feng to come to her? "Chu Feng is very strong," he cautiously reminded. "An ant-like thing. If he really comes, I can slap him to death with one slap." This time, Mu Qing didn't hide her arrogance. She didn't need to put on a fake smile in front of her new confidant. Mu Qinghe was scared. Just how strong was this beautiful woman? One had to know that she was just a maid of that prince. "Well, even if he comes, I won't kill him. I'll just subdue him." Mu Qing revealed a faint smile. Then, she looked at a spiritual peak in the distance. That was Linoy's residence. Mu Qinghe's eyes flickered and said, "Fairy, if you're sure, you can kill your way to Kunlun, destroy Wudong, and flatten Mount Song. The people on these famous mountains are all related to Chu Feng. You're too selfish." Mu Qing glanced at him and said, "Chu Feng killed a son of yours named Mu in Mount Taihang, right?" Mu Qinghe lowered his head. He knew that he wasn't the only one who had submitted. There were others, and he told Mu Qing some of his situations. "I'll wait for him for 2 more days. If he still doesn't come, I'll go out for a walk," Mu Qing said calmly. For 5 days, Chu Feng didn't succeed no matter how hard he tried. He couldn't pick the string of mutton-like grape. He could only sigh and withdraw. These 5 days, the Qilin's lair was still very calm. The disappearance of the stone man and the large winged lizard didn't attract anyone's attention. That was because this place had been too peaceful for the past 20 years. No one had ever dared to break in, and no one dared to act presumptuously. The guards outside rarely changed shift. Chu Feng discovered that it was still calm. He continued to explore. He went deeper into the Qilin's lair and continued his search. There was a dense fog in the deepest part of the lair. There was a stone forest there, and it was also the place where the domains were the most intact. Chu Feng's pupils constricted from far away. What did he see? The legendary Qilin flower. There were many clusters of flowers in the stone forest. They were purple and lustrous. The bowl-sized flower buds were in full bloom, and there were Qilin patterns on the petals. It was extremely astonishing. A faint fragrance wafted out. It wasn't that the flowers weren't strong enough. In fact, when they bloomed, multicolored light surged and broke through the dense fog. However, there was a domain shrouding it, so the true fragrance couldn't overflow. As for pollen, there was no need to even think about it. This is a Qilin flower. It's priceless. Chu Feng's eyes turned red. However, he couldn't enter and could only stare blankly. This stone forest used to be the Qilin's residence. It was an important place. Those were flowers produced by the Qilin's blood energy and energy. Unfortunately, no one could pick them. Even if there were many extraterrestrials living nearby, they couldn't do anything and could only stare blankly. No one could take a single step into the most central stone forest of the Qilin's lair. The true fortunes were all within, and some people even suspected that there were Qilin youngsters inside. There were some relatively large stone houses outside the stone forest. The most powerful extraterrestrials lived there. Chu Feng walked around the central area from a great distance. He saw a rain of light rising from the stone forest from time to time. There was actually a medicinal field in front of him filled with rare divine plants. He swallowed his saliva. Even though he didn't recognize them, he understood that they were definitely priceless rare herbs. He couldn't charge in forcefully because the domains in the central area were the most terrifying. If he were to really set foot inside, his mind would probably be destroyed. Forget it, I'll endure and restrain myself. Chu Feng sighed and suppressed the impulse in his heart. He didn't attempt to break the domains. He couldn't even step foot into the bamboo forest outside, let alone here. In the end, he chose to approach a stone house. There was an old tree in front of the house with a number of scarlet agate fruits growing on it. Some of the fruits on the tree had ripened while others were still a bit short of maturity. Chu Feng believed that these fruits could allow one to sever the seventh shackle and could be harvested to refine medicine. The stone house here was a safe zone. Chu Feng guessed that these fruits had long since lost their use to the owner of the stone house. Otherwise, they wouldn't have allowed them to grow like this without being picked. The creatures in the house were all in deep sleep. Chu Feng silently drifted over and hid within the white mist. It was quite convenient for him to move about. Afterwards, he began to pick the mutant fruit. There were 6 in total, both ripe and unripe. He plucked all of them in one go. To him, this signified an evolution. It would allow his strength to increase explosively. For the fastest novel reading, please visit Chapter 401. The 6 fruits were fragrant and intoxicating. They were the size of chicken eggs, red and sparkling. Their entire bodies were translucent, multicolored light flickering about, surging with life essence energy. Chu Feng was excited as he put them all into the pristine jade bottle. This trip to the Qilin's old lair could be considered a successful mission and could now be considered a successful retreat. These fruits were enough. At the very least, he could refine 2 pills that would allow him to break through to the 9th level of the shackle. Under dangerous circumstances, this would be his life-saving capital. He would be able to go against the current in the coming chaotic times. The extraterrestrial in the stone house had fallen into a deep slumber. He didn't notice that there was someone outside and was still in a daze. Chu Feng knew that this was because he had grasped the ultimate breathing technique. Moreover, he had integrated his spirit into his blood energy and realized the unity of body and soul. Under such a state, even the divine instincts of other evolved beings would be ineffective against him. Unless it was a heaven-chosen Taoist, they wouldn't be able to sense him. This extraterrestrial is very powerful. Even in hibernation and with his blood energy restrained, it still gives off such a great pressure. His level of evolution is no small matter. Chu Feng's expression was solemn. There was a super character among the extraterrestrials. He quietly retreated and left the place. However, Chu Feng didn't leave immediately. He wanted to refine a couple more cauldrons of precious medicines and gift them to the Wudong Grandmaster and the others. There's an ancient tree over there with fruits. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression. The stone forest at the center was where the Qilin resided. There were some sparse stone houses surrounding the stone forest. The most powerful extraterrestrials lived there. There were some ancient trees in front of their houses with fruits that hadn't been plucked. This was a manifestation of their tyrannical strength, because these mutant fruits couldn't help them evolve. Is this a pear tree? Chu Feng was astonished. This old pear tree was at least several thousand years old. Its trunk was very thick and its old bark was cracked. There were only 4 fragrant golden fruits as big as a human head. Swoosh! Chu Feng waved his hand and 4 golden pears fell down. He had succeeded once again. He calculated carefully and found that if he wanted to help an acquaintance like the old Grandmaster and run to Mount Eternal to deliver some pills to Yellow Cattle and the others, he would need quite a bit of them. He wanted to pick a few more. At the same time, this kind of strange fruit gave him a sense of satisfaction. This was a kind of harvest. After all, if such a fruit were to be placed in the outside world, it would definitely lead to a massacre. Blood would flow like a river, and people would be beaten to a pulp. Even without refining such a fruit into medicine, just its original medicinal effects could allow one to sever the 7th shackle. How precious was it? Chu Feng didn't leave. He continued to feel around, wishing that he could pluck them all away. Of course, this was just his imagination. There were many dangerous places in this area that he couldn't step foot into. There were some mutant trees that were full of fruits and surged with divine light. The energy was terrifyingly rich, as if raging flames were surging. They could definitely help one sever even higher-level shackles. However, he didn't even need to think about it. He couldn't pluck it. If they could succeed, the aliens wouldn't just stand by and watch. This won't do. Let's quit while we're ahead. Chu Feng did not let his excitement get to his head. This place was too dangerous. If a powerful extraterrestrial creature were to awaken, it would be fatal. This was their lair. Alerting one of them was equivalent to alerting a whole nest of extraterrestrial experts. At that time, they would surround him here and attack him en masse. He would die without a burial ground. Chu Feng was as light as a feather. He didn't make the slightest sound as he left the misty lair. He wanted to escape. There were many rocks here. Some of them were over 100 meters tall. Upon closer inspection, they were all meteorite. There were also many stones piled up together, forming a messy pile. It was easy to get lost in this area. The terrain was too similar. Chu Feng was shocked. He sensed something while walking out. He sensed spiritual fluctuations and surging blood energy. Was an extraterrestrial being awakened? His hair stood on end. Within a split second, he produced some magnetic crystals. After a series of arrangements, the area was immediately shrouded in white mist and became increasingly hazy. He concealed his figure. Chu Feng hid himself behind a clump of wisteria. This place was filled with rock. Please! He heard a voice and actually saw a familiar face. The master of the Hollow Jade Temple, Yuan. Yuan was an extremely mysterious person to ordinary people. He had actually come to the Qilin's lair to meet the extraterrestrials. After careful thought, as the leader of the mutant organization, he could read many rare ancient documents at any time. He would definitely be able to find the Qilin's lair. It was just that he didn't know where Yuan had come from. Chu Feng held his breath. He hid in a small domain and paid close attention to the area. A number of extraterrestrials accompanied Yuan and walked toward the center of the area. Apparently, the master of the Hollow Jade Temple was going to meet an even more powerful character. That was because the further in they went, the stronger the extraterrestrials were. For a moment, Chu Feng couldn't leave because some of the descenders in this area had awakened one after another. Additionally, whistling sounds were transmitted from the distance. Chu Feng knew things were bad. He had killed the stone man and ambushed the winged lizard earlier on. His plan had most likely been exposed. Enemy attack. We're missing 2 people. The worst had happened. Someone in the distance was shouting and issuing a warning. Chu Feng frowned. He couldn't leave at the moment. He moved stealthily and chose a new hiding place while most of the extraterrestrials hadn't awakened. Swoosh. He quickly approached the bamboo forest and hid within. That was because this place was extremely dangerous and no one would normally set foot in it. Even Chu Feng hadn't been able to break through the domains even though he had studied them for several days. He wanted to pluck those white grape-like mutant fruits, but he was helpless. He laid down magnetic stones and formed a bewildering formation to conceal himself. What's the situation? Some extraterrestrials were roused and emitted powerful energy fluctuations. 2 of our men are missing. There are bloodstains on the ground. Who dares do this? What audacity! This area was very noisy. How many years had it been since anyone dared to behave atrociously here? It had been extremely peaceful for the past 22 years. The Hollow Jade Temple Master Yuan had appeared once again. He followed a group of extraterrestrials to the outer region to investigate. I suspect it's Chu Feng's doing. Everyone, please take a look and see what's been lost here, said Yuan. In the distance, Chu Feng could hear this even though he was quite far away. That was because his divine instincts were too sharp and could clearly sense the movements within 10 to 20 kilometers. To an ordinary person, this was simply a clairvoyant. His expression was gloomy. This person was indeed going all the way to the dark after falling out with him. Even at this time, he didn't forget to make enemies for him. Although this was indeed Chu Feng's doing, Yuan was clearly making enemies for him. There was no reason for him to stop Chu Feng at all costs. Chu Feng's expression was gloomy. He couldn't leave and could only stay here. There shouldn't be any danger in the short term, but he was still quite unhappy that someone had made him a scapegoat. Yuan, I've always remembered our old friendship as a disciple of the Hollow Jade Temple. As long as you don't provoke me again, I won't bother with you anymore. Who would have thought you would go from bad to worse? Chu Feng's eyes were cold. He had never been lenient toward his enemies. He had made his decision. It was fine if there was no opportunity, but if it was convenient, he would directly cut off the head of the Hollow Jade Temple Master Yuan. Oh, everyone, Chu Feng is extremely vicious. Even I, a fellow human, can't stand it. He deceived his master and ancestors, betrayed the Hollow Jade Temple, and committed too many evil deeds. The Hollow Jade Temple Master spoke calmly. He observed the bloodstains on the ground and believed that they had been left several days ago. He suggested that the Qilin's lair dispatch a group of troops to attack Chu Feng. Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei were both killed by him? This person is quite bold. He actually dares to touch the descenders of our Qilin's lair. Doesn't he know we're a powerful alliance? An extraterrestrial expert said coldly. That's right. It must be because Han Wenze and the others were unfortunately killed when they surrounded him. He must have found his way here to take revenge on us. The group of extraterrestrials were very indignant and surged with killing intent. In the distance, Chu Feng was furious. It was clearly Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei who had gone to kill him first. Could it be that he had to wait for death and not resist? Stop quarreling. Only the weak will be noisy and form alliances. If you want to kill that person, go ahead and don't disturb our slumber. It was at this time that someone shouted from the stone house in the depths of the white mist. At the same time, several powerful fluctuations surged up and warned them to be quiet. Those who want to kill Chu Feng can go. Those who don't want to stay. Maintain silence. It was obvious that this place wasn't a single entity. After all, they came from different galaxies and were only a loose gathering place. In fact, they hadn't formed an alliance. There were only a few small groups. For instance, the ones shouting fiercely were those who had good relations with Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei. Finally, a small group of people set out to kill Chu Feng. Yuan didn't leave. He wanted to meet the supreme experts here and discuss some matters. He wanted someone to introduce him to them. Chu Feng cursed. That was because this area wouldn't be peaceful for the next 2 days. There would always be extraterrestrials moving about. As luck would have it, the Hollow Jade Temple Master went to meet a supreme evolved being whose stone house had been visited by Chu Feng and whose mutant fruit had been plucked. Roar. Chu Feng heard a deep roar. His blood energy surged and was extremely astonishing. It was like a surging river. Even if the fruit was useless to that entity, he couldn't tolerate anyone stealing it. Stealing the mutant fruit? Yuan's expression was gloomy. He had come to the Qilin's lair to form a relationship with the extraterrestrials and form an alliance when necessary. Additionally, he had another goal. He hoped to obtain a powerful mutant fruit here and break through. That way, he wouldn't have to worry about Chu Feng coming to kill him. Recently, his days had been very difficult. He was constantly afraid that Chu Feng would suddenly kill him. It must be Chu Feng's doing, he said directly. In any case, he felt that he had to make Chu Feng a scapegoat first. Chu Feng had endured for a long time in the Qilin's old lair. Only then did the area calm down and most of the creatures fall asleep. He took advantage of the opportunity to escape and float away. At this point, he felt that his breathing technique was even more wondrous. At this time, his spirit had fused with his blood energy. Along with the beating of his heart, his spiritual magnetic field spread to his limbs and bones. The fusion was extremely thorough. Body and spirit as one. This characteristic was extremely rare among creatures at this level. Apart from the disciples of the Holy Lands, it was very difficult for others to achieve this. This caused him to disappear soundlessly like a specter. Chu Feng stopped only after he was quite a distance away. He stood guard outside of the day pond and wanted to kill the Hollow Jade Temple Master. That was because Yuan hadn't come out yet. This scourge couldn't be left alive. He was actually bent on making enemies for him. He had already walked down the dark path and wouldn't rest until he was dead. Finally Yuan came out. He was in a satisfied mood. His steps were brisk and his whole body was sparkling. He was emitting powerful energy fluctuations. That was because he had reached a certain agreement with someone in the Qilin's lair. That expert had given him a mutant fruit which allowed him to rapidly evolve and sever his seventh shackle. Moreover, he had received a promise that he would obtain an even more powerful fruit after a period of time. Yuan was very satisfied. This time, his harvest was great. Especially now that his strength had advanced by leaps and bounds, he had great confidence. Even if he still couldn't kill Chu Feng, he would definitely have a chance in the future if things went on like this. That was because this was the Qilin's lair. Some divine medicines would eventually awaken and grow. Yuan was very happy. His usual solemn expression had disappeared. He wore a smile on his face as he walked with relaxed steps along the banks of the day pond. However, when he suddenly looked up, the smile on his face immediately froze. Chapter 402. Yuan's scalp went numb and his body stiffened. This was too sudden. Just now, he had been in a good mood and had been walking on air. Who would have thought that he would encounter this malefic star as soon as he left the Qilint's lair? In a flash, his carefree mood was only left with a cold chill. He had fallen to the bottom of the valley. This feeling was too terrible. 1 foot in heaven and 1 foot in hell. This was a classic case of extreme joy turning to sorrow. He hadn't gone far when he was intercepted. Chu Feng had been waiting here to kill him. Yuan wasn't an ordinary person. In a flash, he realized that Chu Feng had most likely been hiding near the Qilint's lair and had seen him slander him. That was why he was waiting here. He wanted to vomit blood. How could he be so unlucky? Of all times, he had come here to meet this demon king. Moreover, he felt that this time was too tragic. After coming to the Qilint's lair, if he hadn't deliberately slandered Chu Feng and made him a scapegoat, things would not have turned out this way. Although this scapegoat was Chu Feng's, he had courted death by helping Chu Feng put the blame on himself and being discovered by this demon king. This was simply courting death. Even Yuan himself sighed. This time, he had courted death too much. I've been waiting for you for a long time. Chu Feng's words made Yuan's last bit of hope vanish immediately. It was impossible to say that he didn't regret it, especially since he had just broken through. He still wanted to be glorious and resplendent, but in the end, he was about to be killed. He felt sullen. He had just found a shortcut and was about to rise up. He was destined to be glorious and powerful among the human race. However, a mere Chu Feng had knocked him awake from his beautiful dream and was about to consign him to eternal damnation. "Child, can't we be kind to each other?" Yuan asked in a very kind and intimate tone. "You're quite thick-skinned." Chu Feng looked at him coldly. Not long ago, this person was trying his best to make enemies for him, thinking of ways to incite the experts of the Qilint's lair to kill him. Even now, he was still calling him child? Chu Feng definitely didn't feel close to him and felt even more disgusted with him. "We really shouldn't have reached this step." Yuan sighed. "I used to respect you, but what did you do?" Chu Feng looked at him coldly and said, "In the bloody battle at Mount Longhu, for your sake, I even made another trip in and carried you out, saving your life. But what about you? You turned around and used the black substance to harm me, consigning me to eternal damnation and almost causing me to sink into oblivion." Chu Feng was seething with killing intent. The first low point of his life was when he was corroded by the dark matter. He was directly crippled. If it wasn't for his strong willpower, anyone else would have collapsed long ago. Even so, he experienced many dangers before finally transforming the black substance into a fortuitous opportunity and shaping it into the black and white grinding stone. If it was anyone else, they would have died without a doubt. "That was an accident. I didn't mean to harm you." Yuan tried to defend himself and refused to admit it. Chu Feng's expression was indifferent as he said, "What's the point of saying that? Later on, when you saw that you were crippled, you were bent on keeping me and putting me under house arrest. You had already exposed your true colors, but you weren't thorough enough at that time." At this point, Yuan's expression turned sinister as he suddenly raised his head. He knew that there was no point in quibbling. There were only the two of them. Was he going to tell an outsider? "I'm somewhat regretful that I didn't insist on keeping you. I should have killed you directly after squeezing out all the value in your life." He knew that he was finished today and no longer tried to refute hypocritically. "Very well. In a while, I'll be happy to use your method to end your life. I'll kill you directly," Chu Feng said coldly. "Actually, I quite admire you. You killed the ash wolf, suppressed the beast race and suppressed the marine race. You're all too glorious." The Hollow Jade Temple Master calmed down and finally said coldly, All of this happened because you have a peerless breathing technique. Why couldn't you have taken the initiative to let me see it? If I had obtained it, I would have become the world's #1 expert. Is this your motive for harming me? Chu Feng looked at him. Yes. If you had taken the initiative to let me see it, all of this wouldn't have happened, Yuan said with a tinge of resentment. Chu Feng's expression was cold. Not to mention that Yellow Cattle had imparted it to him using a method similar to enlightenment, it was difficult to impart it to others. Even if it was possible, he wouldn't have imparted it to someone with Chong Yuan's mentality. Do you think that all the good things in the world belong to you? Chu Feng shouted. Winner takes all. If I had won, I would have taken your peerless breathing technique and ascended to the position of the world's #1 evolved expert. Everything I said was valuable advice. Now that I've lost, it's all nonsense no matter what I say. After saying these words, Yuan shouted, Let's do it. With a swoosh, he took the initiative to attack. His hand flickered with brilliance as he brought out a small pagoda with specks of metallic luster. This was a badly damaged pagoda. It expanded rapidly in the wind and suppressed Chu Feng. Without a doubt, it was a magical weapon. As the leader of a national mutant organization, how could he not have a powerful weapon on him? Boom! The pagoda came crashing down with a terrifying aura. Strands of energy radiance hung down like a golden curtain, dense and brilliant. Chu Feng paced back and forth. He didn't pay too much attention to this at all. He suddenly waved his palm and slapped it toward the damaged pagoda. This scene was a little frightening. His palm was as resplendent as the sun. It was as if a scorching sun had exploded here, bringing about a flurry of energy particles. Boom! The entire damaged pagoda first cracked and then exploded into pieces. Yuan was astonished. Such a powerful weapon was actually shattered by a single slap from Chu Feng? His body was grazed by some of the fragments and was dripping with fresh blood. Your tyrannical strength has really exceeded my expectations. Yuan Pingyi's expression suddenly turned sinister as he said this. A silver paper flew out from his left hand. It was even sharper and more resplendent than a flying sword. It swept toward Chu Feng like a river of stars. Just this kind of fluctuation was enough to make one's heart palpitate. The surrounding vegetation and boulders were all shattered, and even the Great Lake was steaming as if it was about to dry up. This item could injure an evolver at the shackled realm and was similar to the Golden Arhat talisman. It was a crude product left behind by ancient Taoists. If one were to be struck by it, they would immediately be smashed to pieces. Chu Feng's intuition was astonishing, and his speed was even more astonishing. He activated his divine feat and his feet lit up. In the blink of an eye, he was 2,000 meters away or 2 kilometers away. His current speed was 8 times the speed of sound. In ancient times, he could already be considered an Earth immortal. Now, he could travel 4 to 5 kilometers with a single leap. It was extremely terrifying. As such, after sensing something wasn't right, he immediately leapt out of the way. Boom! Behind him, the mountain rocks were shattered, the river was evaporated, and the forest was completely destroyed. The energy had melted the mountain rocks and caused lava to surge. Yuan took out the silver paper with the energy symbols written on it by the ancient Almighty and immediately escaped. He headed towards the depths of the Day Pond, wanting to return to the Qilins' old lair. As long as he could reach there, there would naturally be powerful extraterrestrials protecting him. However, he had just started to run a certain distance when his vision blurred. Chu Feng had intercepted him and sent a flying kick at him. Thump! Yuan felt a sharp pain in his lower body, and then his whole body was sent flying. When he looked down, his whole body was drenched in cold sweat. He was so scared that his soul almost left his body. It was just a single kick, but the lower half of his body had disappeared and turned into a bloody mist. What kind of combat strength was this? A casual kick had crippled him. You! Yuan was shocked and furious. No one was willing to die, and especially not in such a humiliating manner. I've already said that I'll end your life the way you wanted to deal with me. I'll kill you with a single slap and satisfy your wish. While Chu Feng was speaking, he had already arrived in front of Yuan with a single step and caught up to the hollow jade temple master who was flying through the air. Bang! Chu Feng ruthlessly swung down his palm. His palm was emitting a faint golden luster and absorbing dense energy particles as it suddenly descended. The next moment, Yuan let out a miserable cry. His eyes went wide as he lost the ability to howl. That was because his body had directly exploded, as if he had been struck by a meteorite. The tremendous force was incomparable. He had just severed his seventh shackle and his path to glory had begun. He was destined to become a top expert of the human race by cooperating with the extraterrestrials. But now everything was over. At the last moment, he was filled with fear and regret. He wanted to howl, but he couldn't do it. That mass of spiritual energy had also been scattered by this slap. A ball of light shot out from Chu Feng's right palm. It evaporated the blood energy and shattered bones, turning them into ashes. Yuan's body and spirit were completely destroyed. He was thoroughly dead. Chu Feng strode forward leisurely and headed into the distance. His strength had increased explosively since his successful evolution several days ago. He was just as ferocious as this. A single slap was enough to kill Yuan with 7 severed shackles. If news of this were to spread, it would surely shake the world. Yuan, one of the top 10 experts of the East, had been killed in a single slap after his splendid transformation. This was simply too shocking. He didn't leave the day pond. Instead, he sat on a mountaintop along the path leading to the Qilins' lair. He didn't wait too long. 6 extraterrestrials returned 1 day later. They were precisely the small group that wanted to avenge Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei. They had mustered a large force but returned empty-handed. Hey, look who's that? These creatures were all very sharp. They immediately discovered Chu Feng's energy fluctuations when he wasn't concealing himself. Chu Feng, a man with a crocodile's tail and other parts of his body resembling a human, soared into the air and rushed toward the 1,000-meter-tall mountaintop. He laughed sinisterly and said, "I was just about to kill you." He immediately attacked with a small drum in his hand. As he beat it with all his might, the divine sound was deafening and caused the entire mountaintop to explode. No wonder he dared to charge over alone. The magical weapon in his hand was indeed extraordinary. With such a weapon in hand, he was much stronger than Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei, who didn't have a magical weapon. The might of this magical weapon was extremely astonishing. Boom! Following which, the mountainside and above exploded. The peak was half ruined and smoke and dust filled the air. Is he dead? Don't tell me he's turned into a bloody mist. The extraterrestrial muttered to himself as he fell. However, it was at this moment that his scalp was about to explode. He felt abnormally horrified because he saw Chu Feng descending with him in perfect condition. Moreover, a fist was already right in front of him. "No!" he roared, but his voice came to an abrupt halt. Chu Feng had blown him up with a single punch and turned him into a mass of bloody light that burned here. Swoosh! Chu Feng snatched the small drum away. Even if he couldn't use it, he could give it to someone close to him. Moreover, this item was indeed very powerful. If he hadn't evolved several days ago and his constitution had greatly increased, he might have been shaken to the point where his body would have cracked and bled profusely. But now, his body was tough and full of spirit. He was like a god of war that could crush an entity that had evolved one more time than him. Dong, dong, Chu Feng beat the drum as he landed. The divine sound was deafening and black ripples flew out to attack the enemy. Thump! One of them was the first to be hit, directly exploding, breaking apart under this wave of divine sound. Following that, another person was blasted apart, dying in both body and soul. 3 out of the 6 had died in the blink of an eye. The remaining ones felt a chill down their spines and were completely dumbfounded. How could this be? This demon King Chu was simply too powerful. He had directly snatched the treasured drum and turned the tables on them. "You're courting death!" A yaksha-like man roared and rushed over. He raised his fist and blasted out with surging energy. Chu Feng was shaken. This entity's level of evolution was simply too high. It was likely that he had severed 10 shackles. No wonder they dared to go to the outside world to kill him. His strength was truly terrifying. Boom! Chu Feng struck the drum one last time but was unable to kill the other party. He then put away his spoils of war and continued to fight to the bitter end. He wanted to see if he could fight someone 2 levels above him. He had severed 8 shackles while the other party had severed 10. In theory, the gap was quite large, but he could already easily kill those with 9 severed shackles. He felt that he was becoming more and more valiant as he evolved. Perhaps he could even fight against higher-level entities. Now, Chu Feng was taking the risk to test out his true strength after the 8 trigrams furnace's evolution. Thump! 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 The battle was intense and terrifying. Boulders weighing hundreds of thousands of kilograms were sent flying in all directions because the mountain had been blasted apart. The ancient trees and wisteria were also being torn apart. The boundless energy was boiling violently. The two were locked in a bloody battle. How is this possible? The yaksha with 10 severed shackles was overwhelmed with shock. Blood was dripping from the web between his thumb and forefinger. There were bloody holes on his body from the fist. He had actually sustained serious injuries. He said with a shocked expression, "How could a saint-child-level character appear among the natives of a declining planet?" He simply couldn't believe it. Boom! In the end, he was blasted apart by a single punch from Chu Feng. Blood sprayed out in all directions. The other 2 were scared out of their wit. They turned around and fled. However, Chu Feng opened his mouth and spat out a beam of golden sword qi. It immediately decapitated one of them and left his corpse lying on the ground. Swoosh! Following which, a spear shot out from his back like a dragon. With a puff, it nailed the other person to death. Following which, the corpse exploded. Chapter 403. The forest in the outer regions of Day Pond had been destroyed. It was a complete mess with bloodstains everywhere. 6 extraterrestrial experts had been wiped out by Chu Feng alone. "I'm scared to death. That's a demonic god." A parrot was so frightened that it cried out after Chu Feng had gone far away. It had mutated and could evolve from then on. Naturally, it was a mutant bird. Just now, it had witnessed the battle from afar and was trembling in fear. Even now, its legs were still trembling. There were many other beast races in the vicinity of Day Pond. Just like the parrot, all of them felt their blood run cold. They were still trembling even after that demonic godlike young man had left. If news of the battle here were to spread, it would definitely cause a huge commotion. Chu Feng had killed 6 extraterrestrial experts in succession and once again displayed his demonic king potential. In the past, he had killed the beast races and suppressed the marine race. Now, he was targeting the extraterrestrials and was ridiculously powerful. If his former opponents were to find out about this, they would surely be terrified and furious. Was there still justice in this world? In truth, Chu Feng's ferocious name had already been widely discussed. That was because the battle at Mount Zhijin in Jiangning had confirmed that he had killed several extraterrestrials. Regardless of whether he had used domains to draw out the essence flames of extreme yang to incinerate the enemy, Chu Feng had successfully slaughtered the descenders. This was an indisputable fact. The group of people was dumbfounded. Could he be any more ferocious? The corporate members were silent and wanted to curse in their hearts. Those who had opposed Chu Feng in the past were apprehensive at first. Then, some of them couldn't help but curse, "God damn it, he's become even more ferocious." In the past, Chu Feng was already known as the Demonic King because he was a specialist in killing the beast race. Then, he attacked the marine race. Only when the dark matter had corroded him and he was half crippled did the name, Demonic King, become rarely mentioned. Now, it seemed that his period of seclusion and silence wasn't to cultivate his character, but to prepare for an even greater ferociousness. After the battle at Jiangning, everyone was discussing it. It was simply Demon King Chu's glorious return. The entities of the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave, such as Princess Lin, glanced at each other. They were astonished after several confirmations. A dignified descender squad had been wiped out? Although they weren't from the same faction, they were all from the outer realm. Their expressions were quite unnatural. During the trip to Mount Qinling, they had still underestimated Chu Feng. But now it seemed they had completely underestimated this person. This wasn't the first time he had killed extraterrestrials, but he had always succeeded. This spoke volumes. Princess Lin felt a wave of guilt. She had once made a bet with Chu Feng and lost herself. It wouldn't be easy for her to meet him again. After all, Chu Feng was extremely powerful. Of course, there were also people from the Origin Magnetic Immortal Cave who believed that Chu Feng wouldn't have a good ending after attacking so cruelly. He's too extreme. If he acts like this, he'll easily be targeted and become a thorn in the eyes of some descenders. His end won't be good. There are two outcomes for him. The first is to be killed by a stronger descender, and the second is to rely on the fairies and saints who are about to come to this world. He will willingly become their follower or even their servant. He has two endings. The first is to be killed by an even more powerful descender. The second is to rely on the fairies and divine sons who are about to descend and become their followers or even servants. The more brilliant and outstanding the natives were, the faster they would die. If they wanted to change their fate, the safest way was to serve the divine sons and princesses who had descended from the outer realms. Killing intent had already appeared on Mount Lao while Chu Feng was still in the Qilin's old lair. Mu Qinghe had suggested time and again that they should take the initiative to hunt down Chu Feng. They couldn't let him grow because Chu Feng's domain attainments were progressing too quickly. He can use Mount Zhijin's geography to kill Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei. In the future, he can use the famed mountains and great rivers to ambush the princes. He believed that, with Chu Feng's character, it would be difficult to subdue him. He was too arrogant and should be killed directly. Mu Qing only smiled calmly after hearing this. Haven't you heard of how to train an eagle? There's also the secret method of raising a mastiff. Isn't it more interesting to tame him slowly? He's proficient in domains and can serve the princes. Mu Qing only smiled faintly after hearing this and said calmly, "Haven't you heard of how to train an eagle? There's also the secret method of raising a mastiff and slowly taming it. Isn't that more interesting? He's proficient in domains and can serve the prince." Of course, she also believed that Chu Feng should be captured immediately. He couldn't be allowed to jump around outside. However, there was no news of Chu Feng during these days. She was overseeing Mount Lao and waiting for him to walk right into her trap. It seemed she had failed. Mu Qinghe brought up the old matter and asked Mu Qing to attack, flatten Mount Kunlun, eliminate the Wudong Grandmaster, and force Chu Feng to appear. When the time came, he would be captured alive. Mu Qing pondered for a while and finally decided to leave Mount Lao. "I have to take action, but I can't do as you say. The princes haven't crossed over yet. If I attack like that, I'll attract attention from all sides. The gains won't make up for the losses." With that, she shot a glance at Mu Qinghe and warned him to keep a low profile. This time, there were geniuses from every galaxy. It could be considered a glorious occasion. The goddesses and Tao children coming to Earth must be very powerful. They come from different stars. Even our princes can't say they can defeat all of them. Mu Qinghe was moved after hearing this. How could there be so many experts? Afterward, Mu Qinghe's suggestion to occupy Mount Kunlun or enter Taoism's ancestral mountain was also rejected. Mu Qing said calmly, "Who would dare occupy Mount Kunlun? There won't be a good ending. They simply can't defend it. At that time, once this mountain fully recovers and the peaches of immortality appear, it will definitely cause a storm. Who knows how many people will be watching? Some saints and fairies will be powerful beyond your imagination. Our princes are very powerful, but there's no need to occupy the world's #1 divine mountain. It's better to leave it to others. Sometimes 4th place is better than the top 3. Or maybe we should give up more. 8th or 9th place isn't bad either," Mu Qing added. Afterward, she went down the mountain. It was indeed to force Chu Feng to come out. She had made up her mind to capture him. However, Mu Qing didn't make a big deal out of it. Instead, she displayed her methods in a low-key manner. Her first stop was Mount Taihang and Qingyang Town. She visited Uncle Lu's general store and Zhao San's cold weapon workshop. She met the two of them and some others. She didn't make a move. She only said she admired Chu Feng but couldn't find him. Therefore, she came here to have a look. Her attitude was very gentle. Zhao San had once gifted Chu Feng the thunderous bow. Uncle Lu also treated Chu Feng very well. Because of this, Chu Feng specially came back several times. In addition to visiting them, he also gave them mutant fruit. Now, both of them were mutants. They were suspicious. This girl was very beautiful and had a kind of classical beauty. She looked like a noble lady. However, they had never seen her or heard Chu Feng talk about her. In the end, Mu Qing bid farewell to the townspeople. She had been very kind and left with a smile. Uncle Lu and Zhao San immediately contacted Chu Feng, wanting to tell him that someone was looking for him. However, they couldn't get in touch with him. That was because Chu Feng was in the Qilin's old lair at that time. There was no signal on his communicator. It wasn't until one day later, when Chu Feng intercepted Yuan and killed 6 extraterrestrial experts who had wanted to kill him and walked out of Day Pond, that he saw the message. "A mysterious woman is looking for me?" He immediately contacted Uncle Lu and Zhao San. "She said she admires you. She's very beautiful and always has a smile on her face. Is she your new girlfriend?" Uncle Lu asked happily. Chu Feng's heart skipped a beat. "She said she's currently living on Mount Lao, but she's not that Linoi from Mount Lao Celestial Biology. I've never seen her before," Zhao San added. They had long since become mutants and were always paying attention to some matters in the field of evolution. They knew of the relationship between Chu Feng, celestial biology, and Linoi, an imperial court of evolvers. Chu Feng's eyes revealed a cold glint. He had guessed the other party's background. Was this a threat? No bloody attacks, just a gentle warning? During the battle with Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei at Mount Zhijin in Jiangning, Chu Feng knew about that woman from Mount Lao, although he had obtained very little information from them. That was because the extraterrestrial had wanted him to go to Mount Lao to die. Therefore, he had told him some information. Later on, Chu Feng saw other messages on his communicator. There was news from the great demons of Mount Kunlun. Something had happened to Mount Kunlun. The Snow Leopard King told him that a woman had climbed Mount Kunlun early this morning and challenged them in a low-key manner. In the end, the old llama was sent flying while coughing up blood. The Mastiff King was captured alive and brought away. She attacked? Chu Feng contacted the great demons of Mount Kunlun. After understanding the situation, his expression turned gloomy. Was she trying to force him to appear? She said she wanted to find you. The Mastiff King asked about her identity, but she didn't like it. She directly slapped the Mastiff King to reveal his true form. The Snow Leopard King was very angry when he said this. That was because the woman said the Mastiff King was in good condition and that he should go with her. Good condition? Was she treating him as a battle pet? The Mastiff King's capture wasn't something to be proud of. The great demons of Mount Kunlun didn't announce it to the public and were thinking of ways to rescue him. Therefore, people from all over the world didn't know about it. This woman is very feminine. She's forcing me to find her. Chu Feng put down the communicator, his eyes cold. He took large strides and left Shandong. Very soon, the great demons of Mount Kunlun informed him of the latest situation. The group of people was furious. They sent a few photos and described the latest situation. In the photos, there was a beautiful woman with a fair and delicate face. She was leisurely and slightly lazy. She was wearing sunglasses and was taking a black puppy with her as she went shopping. The puppy struggled but couldn't resist. Chu Feng was enraged when he saw it. He was even more furious than the great demons of Mount Kunlun. That was the Mastiff King. Not only was he in his true form, but he was also being suppressed by an unknown method. His body was no more than a foot long, and he looked like a pet dog. He was an expert of his generation and was invincible in Tibet. He was also one of the most famous experts in the East. He was incomparably brave, but he was being treated like this. Chu Feng was full of killing intent. He had a deep friendship with the great demons of Mount Kunlun and was on good terms with the Mastiff King. When Chu Feng was in trouble, the great demons of Mount Kunlun had supported him. But now, the Mastiff King was being treated like this to force him to show himself. She's just a maid and yet she dares to be so tyrannical. You're courting death. Chu Feng was furious and his eyes were spewing fire. It was rare for him to be so agitated. The Snow Leopard King and the others told Chu Feng that this was a photo taken by a bird king in Jiangning not long ago. Apparently, the woman had noticed it but only revealed a faint smile and didn't stop him. Unbridled, Chu Feng said coldly. This woman didn't want to conquer famed mountains on earth, nor did she want to attract the attention of the world. However, she wasn't the least bit gentle when dealing with him in private. She was gradually escalating and acting in a high-profile manner within a small area. Aren't you looking for me? I'll come knocking on your door and kill you then. And that bullsh *T prince behind you wants to cross over? Kill them all. Chapter 404. Although Chu Feng's emotions were fluctuating violently, he didn't lose his rationality because of this. This woman dared to act in such a manner, so she must have some methods up her sleeve. She's from an imperial court of evolvers. I wonder which star it is? During his trip to Mount Qinling, Chu Feng had seen the ruins of a 4-star imperial court. Their chariots were pulled by quasi-divine beasts, allowing them to roam the various galaxies. There were several platforms there for parking quasi-divine beast chariot. In any case, a power that dared to call itself an imperial court of evolvers was quite terrifying. It was bound to be a top-grade orthodoxy on a planet. Don't tell me this maid has entered the carefree realm? Chu Feng muttered to himself. He soon shook his head because he felt that it was impossible. The more powerful an entity was, the more difficult it would be to cross over. They would have to face the most terrifying domains on Earth. This was something Yellow Cattle had emphasized many times. Only one maid had come from the Imperial Court of Evolvers. The others hadn't taken any risk. After some consideration, Chu Feng felt that she should still be at the Shackled Realm. Even if she was at the Shackled Realm, her level should still be quite high. Chu Feng's eyes were cold. He felt that he should make some preparations. Firstly, he had to evolve once again. It just so happened that he had a mutant fruit on hand. It would come in handy and allow his body to transform and become even more powerful. All methods had to be based on strength. Otherwise, they would all be rootless duckweed and flowers in a mirror. Secondly, he had to lay down an offensive domain to assist him. That was because he couldn't confirm this maid's foundations and didn't know her exact level of strength. Coming from an imperial court of evolvers, she should have at least 1 or 2 secret treasures on her. Chu Feng pondered. He had to consider this factor as well. So much so that this woman might have a great killing weapon on her that could reverse the situation at the critical moment. Afterward, he set out at lightning speed toward Jiangning. He was going to the revered 8 trigrams furnace on Mount Zhijin to refine medicine and evolve once more. However, he noticed that the Snow Leopard King had sent him a message. That woman was in Jiangning City and was strolling through the streets with the Mastiff King chained up by a strange metal chain. Could it be that she has already seen through the secrets of Mount Zhijin? Chu Feng frowned. Up until now, no one knew that Mount Zhijin was the revered 8 trigrams furnace. This type of terrain was a land of natural luck. It would be bad if that woman found out. However, Chu Feng did not slow down and continued to run. As long as he could get into the 8 trigrams furnace first, he wouldn't have to worry about outsiders interfering with his concoction and wouldn't have to fear being attacked. That place had domains left behind from ancient times and contained 8 types of terrifying energy. Once activated, it would immediately turn into a land of death and incinerate all enemies. Apart from the cavern where the 8 trigrams furnace was located, all the other locations had astonishing destructive power. Chu Feng really hoped that the woman would attack him after he entered the revered 8 trigrams furnace. At that time, he would burn her until she was riddled with holes and ashes. On the way, the great demon of Kunlun Mountain kept informing Chu Feng of the recent situation because he was worried that he would be at a disadvantage if he went there. The woman's exact location and route were all known by a bird king from Mount Kunlun. At present, she was still in Jiangning City. Not going for Mount Zhijin? I hope I'm thinking too much, Chu Feng murmured as he continued on his way. Within Jiangning City, Mu Qing was strolling leisurely. A fine silver chain was wrapped around her snow-white wrist and the other end was tied to the Mastiff King's neck. She was very relaxed and fashionable. It was as though she had blended into Earth's civilization and was very interested in shopping. The Mastiff King had been suppressed and had no power to resist. He had never experienced such humiliation in his life and wanted nothing more than to commit suicide. It was just that he couldn't even do so after being bound by the silver chain. The dignified Mastiff King, a peerless expert, was actually being humiliated in such a manner. The corners of his eyes were about to bleed. Mu Qing shot a glance at the Mastiff King and said lightly, "Oh, do you feel indignant and humiliated? Don't worry, you'll feel honored and glorious after a period of time." She glanced disdainfully at the bird king in the distance. How could she tolerate being followed if she didn't need it to bring news to Chu Feng? "Ah, that woman has left the city." The bird king transmitted the news from the sky. Chu Feng was the first to know. Moments later, his heart thumped violently and his brows locked into a deep frown. Things weren't looking good. That woman was rushing toward Mount Zhijin. This was the place he wanted to go, but the woman was also rushing toward the mountain. The first time Chu Feng had nurtured his weapon there, the second time he had refined medicine there. It seemed that he had already aroused the suspicions of the outside world. Now that this woman was heading there, it was obvious that she had some suspicions. By the time Chu Feng arrived at Jiangning, Mu Qing was already close to Mount Zhijin. Swoosh! Chu Feng took a step forward and pierced through the forest like an arrowhead of lightning. However, he slowed down at a relatively far distance from Mount Zhijin. He didn't mind since he dared to force his way into the revered 8 trigrams furnace. However, the Mastiff King was currently suffering in the hands of that woman. If he were to charge in without warning, the situation wouldn't be good. Auspicious Qi curled up around Mount Zhijin, and a rosy mist flowed through it. Mu Qing arrived with the Mastiff King in tow. She was sizing up the area in a relaxed manner. "Oh, the atmosphere here is indeed extraordinary. No wonder Chu Feng came here twice, Mu Qing muttered to herself. Although she wasn't a domain researcher, she came from an imperial court of evolvers and had followed a prince. Her horizons were fairly high. She had come to Jiangning precisely for Mount Zhijin. In this world, there are some special topographies that can nurture fortunes. There were people who hid in the veins of the earth and nurtured divine medicines. There were also those who used rare caves to nurture their golden bodies and transform their physique. There were also those who had died in the Yinyang stone mines and came back to life after hundreds of years. Mu Qing suspected that this might be a land of fortune. The Imperial Court of Evolvers would pay tribute to some domain researchers and ask them to help the imperial family find rare topographies. Mu Qing was influenced by what she saw and heard, and thus was quite sensitive to the topographies. Chu Feng had arrived, but he didn't approach from a great distance. It would be great if the Mastiff King wasn't in that woman's hands. Then, he wouldn't be so apprehensive. This place is quite odd. Don't tell me that Chu Feng is borrowing this place to cultivate? Mu Qing muttered to herself. That was because she knew the methods of domain researchers. Some people could devour the essence of mountains and rivers, which was even more terrifying than eating mutant fruits. She believed that Chu Feng was far from reaching that level. But if this really was a land of fortune, he might be able to obtain many benefits from the special topographies. I'll destroy this place. Mu Qing was quite decisive. She shot out a silver shuttle and blasted it at the topographies in a straightforward manner. Boom! The tranquility was broken. Smoke and dust surged around Mount Zhijin as it suffered an intense attack. This woman is truly despicable. Chu Feng stood on a distant peak and witnessed this scene with his own eyes. His expression was incomparably gloomy. The silver shuttle flew through the air like a silver river of stars. Its might was astonishing as it smashed into the ground, causing rocks to fly into the air and the earth to crack. Chu Feng gazed at it coldly and speechlessly. Boom! After dozens of attacks, Mu Qing finally found the correct area. It was precisely the topographies of the revered 8 trigrams furnace. She had come into contact with a domain left behind from ancient times. Boom! A mass of essence flames of extreme yang erupted, and raging flames raged there. Chu Feng felt that it would be difficult for her to destroy this land of fortune. After all, there were ancient domains protecting it. But he was afraid that she might cause some trouble. That was because he knew there was something extraordinary underground. Crack! Even the metallic qi had been blasted out and gushed upwards. Mu Qing still hadn't stopped. She wanted nothing more than to destroy this place and turn it into a deep abyss. It's truly odd. I'm even more certain that he'll obtain benefits here. Mu Qing muttered to herself as she continued her attacks. Qi. Black mist filled the air amidst specks of black light. In the end, a large patch of raging black flames soared up. She smashed the ground where the essence flames of extreme yang were located and drew upon the terrifying power of the sun. Dong, 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 rocks flew through the air as she attacked dozens of times. It was also at this time that Chu Feng's pupils constricted. Even though he was standing on a distant peak, he could feel that something was wrong. That thing underground, eh? It could be said that Mu Qing reacted quickly. She quickly withdrew the silver shuttle and retreated rapidly. For a moment, she couldn't care less about the Mastiff King. The ground where the essence flames of extreme Yin was located split open, and a large hairy black hand stretched out. It was incomparably terrifying. Ah! Mu Qing turned pale with fright. How could this be? How could there be such a demon in the land of fortune? It didn't match her speculations. In the distance, Chu Feng's expression was cold. He had finally disturbed the thing underground. This Mu Qing reaped what she sowed. Bang! The silver shuttle was immediately slapped by the large black hand. It immediately exploded and turned into a mass of silver powder. With a loud boom, the black hairy hand approached Mu Qing through the darkness of the void. No! She cried out in alarm. This trip to Mount Zhijin was, in her opinion, a failure. She had lost a secret treasure for no good reason and had even suffered a shocking attack. Buzz. The void trembled slightly as a dark green bamboo raft appeared. It carried her and rushed into the sky at an inconceivable speed. However, at the last moment, when the large hand reached the sky, a wave of extreme flames gushed out and brushed past Mu Qing, causing her to scream on the spot. Although it was only a spark, it was still shockingly destructive when it landed on a person's body. Chu Feng sighed inwardly. The large black hand was wrapped in iron chains and bound to the ground. It was already not bad that it could stretch out above ground. Otherwise, its destructive power would be astonishing. At the same time, Chu Feng noticed that the black hand was covered with some golden paper to suppress its energy. Otherwise, it would be incomparably terrifying. Boom! Finally, the black hand sank into the ground and the crack in the area closed. No more clues could be seen. Swoosh! Chu Feng swooped down from the peak and approached the area before leaving with the Mastiff King. Fortunately, Mu Qing had rushed up at the critical moment and the large hand was also aimed at the sky. Otherwise, the Mastiff King on the ground would be in danger. Chu Feng glanced at the revered 8 trigrams furnace. He felt that he couldn't refine medicine now because the thing underground had just been disturbed. If he tried to refine medicine now, he would be courting death. He needed to stay here and calm down. It was better for it to sleep again. Mastiff King, I'll take you to kill her and take revenge, Chu Feng said. He took the Mastiff King and ran madly towards the emerald bamboo raft. Chapter 405. Chu Feng strode forward with his long legs. He was like a human-shaped supersonic battleship. It was no different from flying as he dived over the mountain ridges. 8 times the speed of sound was truly shocking. At first, there was a white mist shrouding his body. This was caused by the drastic change in speed. In ancient times, people believed that immortals rode on the clouds. This was a natural phenomenon that would occur when one's speed increased rapidly. Very soon, Chu Feng discovered that the Mastiff King was acting strangely. He couldn't speak and his body was as weak as an ordinary pet. He was suppressed to a length of 1 foot and couldn't recover. He wanted to tear off the silver chain, but it was astonishingly tough. Even if he were to break the Mastiff King's neck, the fine and delicate chain would probably not break. What shocked Chu Feng the most was that the bamboo raft on the horizon was inconceivably fast and was about to disappear. It had surpassed 8 times the speed of sound. Chu Feng ran madly across the mountain ridges, over the hills, and into the plains. Apart from the shorts and vest made of beast king hide, all his other clothes had been torn to shreds. Yet, he had still lost the bamboo raft. He wanted to curse out loud. This was the first time in his life he had experienced such a thing. It was as if he had expressed his feelings wrongly. His fighting spirit and murderous intent had all dissipated. He had wanted to avenge the Mastiff King, but in the end, not even the shadow of the Mastiff King could be seen. What made him want to vomit blood the most was that the woman had no idea that someone was chasing after her. What did this mean? The bamboo raft fled at a frighteningly high speed. This should have been the best opportunity to kill Mu Qing. It didn't matter if she had evolved to a higher level or not. Now that she had been burned by the essence flames of extreme, even if she didn't die, she would at least lose a layer of skin. However, the bamboo raft made of mystical green bamboo was so strange that it was even more powerful than a flying saucer. It had disappeared just like that. Was this a manifestation of an evolved civilization suppressing a technological civilization? Chu Feng was speechless. He took a deep breath and slowed down his pace, stopping in the middle of the plains. This was truly a pity. This was not a good thing. Although she was a maid, she had many tricks up her sleeve. Missing the opportunity to eliminate future trouble made Chu Feng feel uneasy. She went to Mount Taihang for a stroll, and went to the Kunlun Mountains to suppress them with force. If he let her go this time, who knew what this woman would do next? Mastiff King, what's wrong with you? Chu Feng communicated with the Mastiff King. Since it couldn't communicate with words and couldn't open its mouth, it could only use its mind. Prince Ching had suffered the greatest humiliation in his life and had the thought of committing suicide. Now that he was saved by Chu Feng, his mood fluctuated violently. This was a ferocious man of his generation. He was once incomparably brave, yet he was treated like this by that woman. Even Chu Feng felt angry for him. That woman is very strong, don't take the risk. Chu Feng sensed the Mastiff King's spiritual undulations. Even though he was furious and humiliated, he still reminded Chu Feng not to be impulsive and told him how powerful that woman was. King Cheng wanted to take revenge, but he did not want to implicate Chu Feng. After he evolved to the next level, he swore that he would kill that woman to wash away the shame. Chu Feng said, "It's too easy to kill her directly. Isn't she the handmaiden of that heaven-chosen prince? Then I'll destroy her master and let her see it with her own eyes. I'll destroy her sense of superiority and belief. So what if she's from the imperial court? Heaven-chosen prince? They'll all be destroyed." Chu Feng was afraid that the Mastiff King would be filled with depression and something bad would happen to him. Therefore, he set a short-term goal for him. "All right." The Mastiff King nodded. At this moment, a fierce bird descended from the sky. It was the Bird King from Mount Kunlun who was responsible for keeping an eye on that woman. "Mastiff King!" He cried out in surprise. "Take the Mastiff King back to Kunlun first. I'll find a way to break this silver chain later," said Chu Feng. The Mastiff King and the Bird King asked Chu Feng where he was going. "I'm going to Mount Lao to hunt that woman down. I can't let her have it easy even if I have to leave her crippled life to watch that so-called heaven-chosen prince be destroyed." Afterwards, Chu Feng frowned and said, "We should temporarily abandon Mount Kunlun under such circumstances. The extraterrestrials will descend in large numbers and occupy the number 1 divine mountain. We're bound to become the target of public criticism. We all have this idea. We'll retreat later." The Bird King from Mount Kunlun sighed. That woman had ascended Mount Kunlun and used her martial power to suppress them. This had dealt a considerable blow to the great demons. They realized that Earth's stage would explode in the near future. At that time, many geniuses from various galaxies would compete. Chu Feng knew that the following period would be difficult for the evolvers on Earth. An intense clash between different civilizations was about to begin. To those who were not involved, it might seem resplendent. Divine suns would move unhindered, Tao suns would contend for hegemony, fairies would be breathtaking, and Buddhists would spread their faith. It was absolutely splendid. But to the creatures on Earth, this might signify an exceptionally bitter end. The blood and bones would serve as a backdrop to the splendid opening of the saints' sons and goddesses. It was a dazzling picture scroll. Chu Feng quickly left messages for everyone he knew, including the Wudong Grandmaster and the others. He took this opportunity to leave the famed mountains and his original dwelling. He was going into seclusion. The Mastiff King and the Bird King saw his solemn expression and realized that Chu Feng was about to go all out. They became worried. "Chu Feng, don't be rash. I know what I'm doing," Chu Feng replied. In the past, he had fought against the beast race and the marine race in the same way. Compromise was useless. Peace could only be achieved through slaughter. Only those with the corresponding strength could talk to those creatures. Otherwise, everything else would be meaningless. Chu Feng left and ran all the way north toward the Shandong region. That maid had left too quickly. She hadn't even discovered that he was chasing after her. That was even better. He could catch her off guard and perhaps succeed in his 1,000-mile ambush. To Chu Feng, 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers wasn't difficult at all. He could cover it in less than an hour. As he approached Mount Lao, he saw the undulating waves of the blue sea. Chu Feng slowed down and entered the mountains like a specter. He was searching with his outstanding divine instincts. Apart from discovering some members of the Celestial Biology Institute, the first person he found was actually Linhui. She was on a spiritual peak where there was an ancient silver pine rooted to the cliff. The energy within was extremely dense and was accompanied by white mist. Chu Feng hesitated for a moment before leaving quietly to continue his search. Over there, on a spiritual peak not far from Linhui, there was a woman sitting cross-legged in a bamboo forest. The emerald green bamboo raft had been tossed to one side and was actually partially burnt. As for the woman, she was surrounded by white mist and her energy was restrained. She was treating her injuries. She had been badly burned and many parts of her body were emitting strands of extreme energy. The black flames had long since been extinguished. It was obvious that she wasn't simple. Some parts of her body, such as her waist and abdomen, were glowing with a radiant light after applying the medicinal ointment. The medicinal effects were astonishing and the burnt flesh was gradually recovering. This woman has severed at least 10 shackles. Chu Feng revealed an odd expression. Just how powerful was that prince? And this was only a maid? Chu Feng's spirit and body had merged as one, allowing him to blend into the mountains and rivers. Other beings would find it difficult to sense him. This was his outstanding advantage. He approached the spiritual peak and prepared to ambush and capture the woman in one fell swoop. However, for some reason, his body became slightly stiff as he approached. The breathing technique Yellow Cattle had taught him was circulating smoothly, allowing him to experience such an experience while his body and mind were empty. Chu Feng was frightened and decisively retreated. There was an indescribable danger in this place, and he actually hadn't discovered it for a moment. Following which, he circulated the thunderous breathing technique from a sufficient distance. It wasn't to shake his muscles, bones, and organs, but rather to breathe deeply and harmonize with the heaven and earth. At his current level and with a deeper understanding of the breathing technique, he increasingly realized that this was an indispensable foundation for his future evolution. His body and heart were at peace. The thunderous breathing technique could refine his blood, strengthen his bones, and strengthen his organs. It could also refine his spirit and calm his body like a monk undergoing nirvana. This was his most recent comprehension. Now, he was in such a state. As expected, after his spirit had calmed down, it was as if everything had been extinguished. Chu Feng felt his heart palpitate again. That mountain peak was indeed not simple. He used the breathing technique Yellow Cattle had taught him and the thunderous breathing technique at the same time to examine it. Chu Feng was sure that this wasn't an illusion and that there was indeed a great danger in this place. In the end, he clearly understood that there was an extraordinary secret treasure on the mountain that was concealing something. If he didn't have the ultimate breathing technique, he wouldn't have been able to detect it at all. Chu Feng merged into one with the surrounding rocks and plant. He lay dormant in the distance and paid close attention to that spiritual mountain. He didn't use the fiery eyes because he was worried that he would be discovered if he caused too much of a commotion. He still couldn't retract the golden light in his eyes and reach a level where there were no ripples or waves. In any case, he had already clearly understood that there was something wrong with that mountain peak. He would just watch like this. 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours until the 5th hour that woman stood up. The wounds on her body were still emitting extreme qi. After being corroded by such a high-level energy, it would take a long time for her to recover. She swept her gaze over the mountains and sighed softly as if she was extremely disappointed. It was also at this time that some figures appeared inexplicably in the bamboo forest. They appeared abruptly and were extremely strange. Chu Feng's pupils constricted. There was indeed something strange about that place. There was an indescribable artifact concealing the aura on the mountain peak. It had just concealed the figures of those people, and laid down a killing trap. If he had charged over just now, he would certainly have been ambushed. At this time, Chu Feng was attentively observing those beings. There were 2 or 3 familiar faces, and he immediately knew their origins. They were from the Qilins' old lair. He had seen 2 or 3 of them when he was there. Chu Feng was speechless. This woman was truly feminine. She actually didn't return to Mount Lao after being heavily injured at Mount Zhijin, and fled without looking back. Evidently, because Mount Lao and the Qilins' old lair were both within Shandong, she had used her extreme speed to go to the Qilins' lair and invite some people over. This wasn't only to protect her but also to ambush and kill those who dared to harm her on Mount Lao. This woman was truly cautious and ruthless. She was still thinking of plotting against others while fleeing. Chu Feng frowned. From this woman, he could tell that the prince was likely to be difficult to deal with. If it were anyone else, they would have been killed in the slightest bit of carelessness. Since he had seen through her, Chu Feng was naturally even calmer. He was waiting for an opportunity, and wouldn't let her go no matter what. Chapter 406. Linoy climbed the mountain amidst the sunset glow. Her white dress accentuated her pure and otherworldly beauty. She was usually cold and elegant, but she would be exceptionally charming when she smiled. The afterglow of the setting sun shone upon her body, giving her a faint golden glow. Her fine black hair fluttered in the wind and her beautiful countenance was dyed with a holy radiance. Chu Feng watched in silence from afar. On Spirit Peak, although Mu Qing was heavily injured, she still bowed to Lin Naoi in a serious and formal manner, dutifully positioning herself as a maidservant. She was very happy as she welcomed Lin Naoi with a smile. Linoy inquired about her injuries with concern and presented her with the latest medicine developed by celestial biology. She told her that it was made from the active substances extracted from the highest-grade mutant fruits and was extremely effective. Mu Qing learned that only 3 bottles of the blue medicine had been successfully refined and were extremely precious. She revealed an astonished expression and felt waves of coolness after applying some to her wounds. The effects were surprisingly good. Chu Feng watched the 2 people on the mountain. After circulating his breathing technique, his senses had sharpened and he could clearly capture everything happening there. He remained silent. On the mountain, Mu Qing raised her hand and a jade-green veil covered the area, concealing everything. She then invited Linoy inside and the place immediately became blurry. The 2 people disappeared along with the jade-green veil. Chu Feng immediately understood that the people from the Qilins' old lair must have been hiding inside the jade-green veil. That was a secret treasure capable of concealing one's aura and preventing outsiders from sensing it. The evening glow was about to fade away and the land was as red as blood. This area was very tranquil. Even the jade-green sea below Mount Lao was very calm at this time. There was no wind or waves as it reflected the last rays of the setting sun. Chu Feng gazed at the mountain. His ultimate breathing technique had enhanced his perception but unfortunately, it was isolated by the jade-green veil. At this time, he thought of the Linoy of the past. His deepest impression of her was her rationality. She was always calm and had nothing to do with being impractical or impulsive. Naturally, he wouldn't be able to see her passionate side. As for his impression of her beauty and cool temperament, it was instead ranked behind her practical rationality. Chu Feng recalled that ever since he met Linoy, she had never lost her composure. She had always been so rational and could calmly make decisions. After a long time, it was already night time. Stars twinkled in the sky and the full moon hung high in the sky. There was finally some movement on the mountain peak. The green muslin tent appeared and was already opened. Linoy walked out, and under the moonlight, her entire body was covered in clear splendor. She looked otherworldly and holy. Mu Qing's face was full of smiles. Even though she was injured and smiling affected her wounds, she still expressed her joy. She accompanied Linoi down the mountain all the way to the foot of the mountain. When Mu Qing ascended the mountain, Chu Feng wanted to approach like a specter, but in the end, he stopped. The people of the Qilin's old lair were like ghosts that refused to disperse. They were still there, floating in the forest. Chu Feng continued to lie low, waiting for an opportunity to hunt. The Mastiff King had been humiliated in such a way, and Uncle Lu and Zhao Sanj had also been visited by this woman. Chu Feng didn't want to let this feminine woman become a threat again. It wasn't until midnight that Mu Qing opened her eyes. Her injuries had recovered a bit, but she was frowning. Now, she was speechless and felt as if she had expressed her feelings wrongly. She had prepared people to wait for the fish to take the bait, but in the end, nothing happened. According to her speculations, after humiliating the Mastiff King and deliberately revealing her whereabouts, she would inevitably be targeted by Chu Feng and the others. This was especially true since she had been unexpectedly injured. How could they miss such an opportunity? In the end, regardless of whether it was the big or small fish, not a single one came. This made her somewhat unhappy. It was as if she had clenched her fist and was ready to strike at any moment to injure the enemy, but in the end all she saw was air. It was a waste of energy and expression. Mu Qing was very depressed. She felt that she had made an unnecessary move. In truth, the experts from the Qilin's old lair were also very impatient. This woman had invited them over to help her and vowed to catch the big fish. But in the end, where were they? If it weren't for the fact that she was the maid of that heaven-chosen prince, they would have long since flared up. They felt that she had nothing better to do than to hide here and count the stars. It was too boring. Don't relax. Perhaps a big fish has come and is quietly waiting for an opportunity in the dark. Mu Qing calmly said. In truth, she felt that this wasn't bad. At the very least, she could recuperate in peace and not be afraid of being attacked or disturbed. She thought that she would completely recover in a day or two. At that time, it wouldn't matter anymore. If the enemy really came, she could just slap them to death herself. The world was extremely dark before dawn. Mu Qing opened her eyes once again, revealing a pair of sparkling eyes. The night was about to pass, and this should be the time when the vigilant people were more relaxed. If there really was an enemy attack, it should have appeared. However, nothing happened until the sky brightened and the sun rose from the east. I've really overestimated him. In the end, he's just a cowardly native who doesn't even dare to come here to attack. He lacks courage and is nothing more than a small fish. Mu Qing smiled faintly, but she was actually in a bad mood. At this time, the morning glow was shining, and the white fog in the mountain was dyed with the red sun. It was a warm and comfortable scene. She sighed. She had miscalculated this time. No one would come at all. As for the 5 from the Qilin's old lair, they were also speechless. What was this? She had just stood guard for the entire night. They cursed silently. This woman seemed to have a lot of thoughts, but she was still petty in the end. What was the use of mobilizing such a large force to set up an ambush? Everything was just wishful thinking too much. I'm going to see His Highness the Prince. You guys should come with me, said Mu Qing. Okay. The 5 experts nodded. Only now did they raise their spirit. The reason they had come here was to establish a relationship with the people from the imperial dynasty of evolvers. No matter where they were, orthodoxies called imperial dynasties were all terrifying powers. After arriving at the foot of the spiritual peak and walking toward the depths of the mountain range, Mu Qing suddenly stopped when she saw a clear spring nearby. She turned around and said, "Everyone, please stop for a moment. I'm going to freshen up." The 5 revealed odd expressions, but they still retreated. Mu Qing was a woman and also someone close to the prince. Now that she had an important matter to attend to, she naturally wanted to show her beautiful side. However, she had been burned and some parts of her beautiful figure were charred black. This was truly damaging to her image, so she wanted to put on makeup before the clear water to make up for it. Only at this time did Chu Feng truly move. He had waited quietly for the entire night. He was extremely patient and had finally found an opportunity to attack. He used his unimaginable spiritual senses to evade everyone and walked noiselessly through the shrubbery. His spirit merged with his flesh and blood, and his body and soul became one. He used the ultimate breathing technique to adjust himself to a state of emptiness. The morning glow was dazzling and warm. Mu Qing arrived at the spring where it was very quiet. She began to touch up her makeup in hopes of making herself beautiful enough. The sun had already risen, so she had long since let down her guard. At this time, Chu Feng suddenly launched an attack. The lightning rune on his left palm was glowing, and his left hand was holding onto the violet lightning hammer to amplify the might of the lightning. What could be faster than lightning? In order to kill her, Chu Feng had waited for an entire night. How could he miss this opportunity? He wanted to break her body in one strike. His first attack had to heavily injure her. It would be her misfortune if he accidentally killed her. From the bottom of his heart, Chu Feng wanted nothing more than to kill her directly. However, he had promised the Mastiff King that he would give him a chance to solve the knot in his heart. In fact, it was just as Chu Feng and the Mastiff King had said. Killing this woman directly would be letting her off lightly. It was best to keep her alive for now. Boom! At this moment, lightning erupted. Thunderbolts gushed out from Chu Feng's palm and spread along the purple-gold lightning hammer before pouring out in torrents. The density of the energy was shockingly high. A thick and glaring beam of light shot toward Mu Qing's back. She had been tense all night and was now in a completely relaxed state. She had never expected to be ambushed amidst the radiance of the morning glow. Thump! The beam of lightning struck her back, causing her to cough out large mouthfuls of blood. Her body was sent flying, suffering severe injuries. Chu Feng was astonished. According to his prediction, this woman's body should have been broken into pieces and her chest would have exploded. However, the result was completely different. Damn it, she has a protective secret treasure. He finally understood what had happened. This woman's chest was protected by an indescribable armor. If he had known earlier, he would have attacked her abdomen directly. That place had been burnt before, so it would definitely have pierced through and severed her body. Chu Feng reacted quickly. Without hesitation, he pounced forward and attacked once again. He brandished the violet lightning hammer and blasted out a beam of lightning. However, this woman had woken up and was no longer defenseless. Her powerful divine instincts began to evade danger, and she reacted in advance. At the same time, the 5 experts from the Qilins lair also heard the commotion and rushed over at the first moment. Each and every one of them was like lightning, accompanied by astral winds and flying sand and pebbles. As the 5 of them ran, the forest exploded and the entire forest was destroyed. Boom, boom, boom. The deafening thunder evaporated the spring and creek. Chu Feng went berserk. He brandished the violet lightning hammer and struck out many times in the blink of an eye. Mu Qing was very powerful and her reaction was also fast. However, she had yet to recover from the injuries inflicted by the solar essence flame. Now she was at a great disadvantage. This was especially true since the first strike hadn't pierced through her back, but she was still struck. Her body was in pain and numb, and her movements were unnatural. And now it was still lightning. The attack was too fast and impossible to defend against. Thump! Her body suffered a heavy blow and erupted with lightning. Her abdomen almost exploded as blazing radiance spread out. Chu Feng was astonished. This woman was actually so powerful. She was able to resist another bolt of lightning without being blasted to pieces. 5 figures streaked across the sky from behind and were about to arrive. In addition to brandishing the violet lightning hammer and erupting with lightning, Chu Feng also spat out a beam of sword light from his mouth. That was the metallic sword qi nurtured in his lungs. It was invincible and flew out like a flying sword. This strike finally paid off and cut off one of Mu Qing's arms. The metallic sword qi was as bright as snow and crisscrossed like a divine rainbow. It crushed the falling arm and blood splattered in all directions. Ah! Mu Qing screamed in an incomparably mournful voice. She was shocked, angry, and terrified. She was a beautiful woman, yet she had lost an arm. This was simply unbearable. Kill him! Mu Qing's hair was disheveled. She screamed at the 5 people running over. Her body was also glowing and emitting energy without regard for anything else. She wanted to fight to the death with Chu Feng. Chu Feng's eyes were cold. His eyes shot out 2 dazzling beams of golden light. That was the wondrous effect of the fiery eyes. With 2 sounds, 2 beams of golden light flew out and struck Mu Qing's body. She was drenched in blood and sent flying. Boom! At the same time, Chu Feng rushed over and smashed the violet lightning hammer down on her abdomen. A huge bolt of lightning bloomed once again. This time there was no suspense. Mu Qing's abdomen exploded and her body was split into 2. She screamed miserably. At the same time, the metallic sword qi revolved and minced the lower half of her body into pieces. With a swoosh, Chu Feng disappeared and rushed into the woods. "I'll leave you alive and watch the imperial court of evolvers fall," Chu Feng said coldly. Just before he left, he couldn't hold back his killing intent. He waved his hand and shot out another bolt of lightning. This one struck Mu Qing and revolved around her head, causing her to fall to the ground. It was unknown whether she was dead or alive. Her constitution was astonishingly strong, because anyone else in her place would have been blasted apart and turned into meat paste after experiencing such an attack from Chu Feng. Chu Feng ran madly and secretly rejoiced that he had gone all out. If he had held back in order to keep her alive, he might not have been able to injure her. Behind him, the 5 experts arrived. 3 of them had severed 10 shackles and the other 2 were experts with 9 severed shackles. This combination was astonishing. However, Chu Feng didn't run away frantically after escaping into the woods. Instead, he counterattacked at the critical moment with a fatal blow. The moment he turned around and lowered his head, his spine began to glow. A dragon snake soared up and transformed into a golden spear containing terrifying energy as it flew towards the group. Thump! One of the experts with 9 severed shackles was immediately pierced through by the spear and exploded. "You dare!" The other 4 were furious. The 3 experts with 10 severed shackles soared through the air and pounced over. 2 of them actually had a pair of wings on their backs and could fly. Chu Feng didn't stop and continued to run. However, his speed was limited by the mountains in his way. In the end, he dived down from a nearby mountain and dived into the blue sea in front of Mount Lao. "I'll kill you even if I have to go to heaven or hell." The 2 experts with wings on their backs dove into the vast ocean and chased after him. At the bottom of the sea, Chu Feng didn't run. He held the diamond chakram in his hand and waited for them to approach. "Die!" The 2 experts roared spiritually and rapidly closed in on Chu Feng. Boom! Seeing them approach, Chu Feng shot out the diamond chakram without the slightest hesitation. This time, it wasn't to smash the 2 to pieces but to draw out the essence flames of extreme yang. Boom! Resplendent golden light soared up and drowned out the seawater. Meanwhile, Chu Feng himself entered the pristine jade bottle and drove it into the distance. Ah! The 2 creatures screamed miserably as the seawater boiled. On the coastal mountain, the other 2 experts glanced at each other in dismay. They saw the violent energy fluctuations in the sea and didn't dare go down. Very soon, Chu Feng returned with great speed. The essence flames of extreme yang had dispersed and one of the experts had already been burnt to ashes. Even the seawater couldn't do anything about it. The other had only half his body left. Chu Feng arrived in front of him, and struck out with his palm across the seawater. The man who was struggling at death's door was torn into pieces and died on the spot. Swoosh! He found the diamond chakram and put it away. Chu Feng was secretly speechless. Last time, he had absorbed too much essence flames of extreme yang. The entire seabed was filled with high-grade energy that hadn't dissipated even after a long time. Only after half an hour did the area return to peace. On the coast, the two experts from the Qilins' old lair glanced at each other and felt a chill run down their spine. That was because their companions had disappeared without a trace. The two hesitated for a moment before turning to leave. They weren't willing to stay any longer. After a long while, Chu Feng emerged from the sea. He dried his clothes and quickly went ashore. He glanced at Mount Lao and once again walked into the mountain range. Chapter 407. Early in the morning, the rising sun was bright red and reflected a scarlet reflection on the surface of the sea. Along with the rise and fall of the waves, it transformed into large patches of golden fragments. Mount Lao was exceptionally auspicious. The mountain body carried a special energy substance, the immortal mist. After being bathed in the morning glow, it was instantly beautiful with clouds rising and falling. This mountainous region was adjacent to the Jade Sea. Gazing into the distance from the mountain, one could see the boundless Jade Sea stretching as far as the eye could see. It was exceptionally majestic, and made one's mind feel carefree and open. No one else discovered Chu Feng ascending the mountain. He arrived at a tranquil peak where a 1,000-year-old Taoist temple stood. A silvery white pine tree had taken root in front of it. Linoy's divine instincts sensed something and walked out of the Taoist temple amidst the morning glow. Her face was suffused with a faint golden halo and her hair was glowing. She was dressed in clean white clothes and gave off a feeling of transcendence. The two looked at each other in silence at first and then walked toward the small Taoist temple together. Chu Feng had something to ask her. It was simple and direct. He wanted to know if she wanted to walk together with Mu Qing and that so-called Imperial Court of Evolvers. This place is very dangerous. You should go and leave Mount Lao immediately. Linoy looked at him. Just like before, she maintained her calm and rationality. Mu Qing woke up. The grass was covered in bloodstains and the pain almost made her faint again. She couldn't help but let out an ear-piercing shriek. She had already lost her left arm and the lower half of her body had been severed. For a beautiful girl like her, this was akin to falling into the abyss of hell. She couldn't accept this. Take me to the depths of Mount Lao. She only became slightly clear-headed after a long while. Although she was no longer hysterical, her emotions were still fluctuating violently. She had been crippled by a heaven-shaking attack amidst the auspicious morning glow. This was a fate worse than death. Many people from the Celestial Biology Institute had already arrived to help her stop the bleeding and treat her wounds. But what use was it? Her limbs were already crippled. She was still young and a noble lady, yet she was willing to follow that prince. She still had great ambitions, but she had just arrived on this planet when she was crippled by a native. At this moment, her heart was filled with haze and all her hopes turned to dust. She felt that the brilliant grand Tao she had designed had already been broken and that everything would have nothing to do with her. That native! She screamed loudly, inwardly full of resentment. She was actually crippled, injured to this extent. Someone carefully placed her on a stretcher and carried her quickly and steadily towards the depths of Mount Lao. This was Mu Qing's request. She was unwilling and perhaps only the imperial prince could save her. She wanted to ask the Prince of Deqi to avenge her and capture that native. If she simply killed him, it would be letting him off too easily. She hoped that she could leave that native alive and use the cruelest methods to torture him. Linoy stood under the pine tree and repeatedly told Chu Feng not to come again. The people from Dynasty of Evolvers were very strong, and Chu Feng was far from their match. Chu Feng turned around and went down the mountain. He contacted the Mastiff King and the others and told them that he had already collected a portion of the interest. The woman was now half crippled and was temporarily spared. Afterwards, he soundlessly took advantage of the chaos on Mount Lao to ascend the peak where Mu Qing was. He immediately saw the emerald bamboo raft she had left behind. The essence flames of extreme yang had left some glaring marks on its surface. The damage wasn't light and some parts were almost burnt to a crisp. Chu Feng tested it and found that it could soar into the sky as long as he poured energy into it. This wasn't a bamboo raft that could be driven by spiritual arts and could be activated simply by pouring energy into it. This was a flying tool that went against science and technology. The jade-green bamboo raft could originally be shrunk to the size of an inch and could be carried on one's body at any time. However, the damaged parts could no longer fit in one's palm. Chu Feng directly put it into the spatial bottle. This item was quite useful to him because it could allow him to fly into the sky and tunnel underground. Afterwards, he advanced towards the depths of Mount Lao and circulated the thunderous breathing technique. He allowed his body to sink into a state of stillness and become one with the mountain rock. No one could sense him. He wanted to see how powerful the people from the dynasty of evolvers were, what level that prince had evolved to, and what their next movements would be. In the depths of Mount Lao, Mu Qing was crying bitterly. Her usual calm smile was nowhere to be seen as she struggled to get up from the stretcher. The people from celestial biology sent her into the folded space, while Mu Qing stood at the side with her head hung low. The beings from the outer realm who had survived the trials on Earth were no longer affected when entering and exiting the folded space. They were no different from the natives. "Don't cry," said the prince of the great Qi dynasty, Qi Yu. The azure golden chariot was engraved with traces of time and was filled with an ancient aura. From time to time, large amounts of divine light would surge up and condense into divine beasts like the white tiger and the vermilion bird. Qi Yu was clad in metallic armor and a purple-gold crown on his head. He had an imposing appearance and a pair of abstruse eyes. He stepped down from the chariot in one step and picked up Mu Qing. His calm and steady temperament was shattered as his body erupted with blazing radiance. His eyes shot out two terrifying beams of light as he circulated his terrifying breathing technique. Columns of air gushed out from his mouth and nostrils. Even the pores on his body were like this as dense life energy poured into Mu Qing's body. "Your Majesty, I originally wanted to tell you a piece of good news, but on the way." Mu Qing wept. "Let's not talk about this first. I'll help you treat your injuries." Qi Yu turned around and spoke to a beautiful lady on the chariot who was holding a sword and scripture scroll for him. "Bring me my medicinal liquid." At this moment, a group of people had already surrounded them. Many of them were inquiring about what had happened. All of them were furious and filled with killing intent. They wanted nothing more than to rush out of this space. But many people were startled after hearing the great Qi prince's words. An old man carrying a medicinal basket on his back whispered, "Your Majesty, that's the divine medicine you need to save your life. Mu Qing needs it more now. Hand it over." Qi Yu was imposing without being angry. His entire body was flowing with a brilliant radiance like an eternal divine furnace burning. His ocean-like blood energy suffused the air and caused the entire mountainous region to tremble violently. Mu Qinghe, who had followed Qi Yu in from the Celestial Biology Institute, was trembling. He couldn't stand at all and directly prostrated himself on the ground out of a primal instinct. In this area, the mountainous region was trembling and a gale was whistling. Large patches of trees swayed violently as tens of thousands of leaves rustled down. Everything was caused by Qi Yu's eruption of energy. He was emitting an indescribable aura. At this time, not to mention those from the Celestial Biology Institute, even the hearts of many people from the great Qi dynasty were throbbing. Some people couldn't help but tremble. On the chariot, the beautiful lady who was holding the divine sword and scripture scroll fetched a fist-sized crystal ball and handed it over to Chiyu. "Your Majesty!" Mu Qing's voice was trembling. Sealed within the sparkling and translucent ball was a bright red liquid. It was the juice of a type of fruit, a rare great medicine. Chiyu held the crystal ball and used a secret technique to open it. He poured out a portion of the liquid. "Don't talk. Drink it," Chiyu said gently. The bright red liquid flowed into Mu Qing's mouth. Soon, her entire body was emitting a scarlet glow as a dense vitality surged. It was extremely astonishing as it spread through all of her wounds. Very soon, Chiyu sealed the crystal and put it away. "Your Majesty, I'm willing to die for you at any time." Mu Qing choked with sobs. "Don't speak carelessly. Your life is related to the fate of everyone here." Chiyu consoled her. At this time, even the somewhat dissatisfied old man carrying the medicine basket felt relieved. He felt that the prince was doing the right thing and that Mu Qing needed to be protected. After taking the red liquid, Mu Qing's mental state rapidly improved. The wounds on her body were even more astonishing. They were wriggling and there were granulation and even bone growth. She wept tears of joy. "Rest at ease. Everything will pass." The great Qi prince's tone was gentle. Then, he became stern and awe-inspiring. His eyes erupted with divine radiance and his body was as resplendent as the sun. He said coldly, "No matter who he is, he must be exterminated in body and soul after injuring you to such an extent. Your Majesty, let me cross over first and kill that native. Let me go and kill him with one hand." At this time, the two mounted knights jumped down from their mount. They were clad in armor and knelt down on one knee to seek justice for Mu Qing. "Commanders, please don't take the risk. In truth, he wouldn't have been able to injure me if I hadn't been injured." Mu Qing spoke. She didn't want these two powerful commanders to risk their lives to cross over. She couldn't bear the responsibility if they were to fail. The two commanders stood up. One of them was dressed in silver armor, looking valiant and fierce as he said, "Even dregs of the natives dare to injure our people. Unfortunately, the will of this planet is half dead, and its desire to protect the natives is too strong." The great Qi Prince Chiyu waved his hand to stop them from speaking. He glanced at Mu Qing and said, "You said you had something important to tell me." "Yes, Your Majesty. I have good news to report to you. We can cross over very soon." Mu Qing couldn't hide her joy. She then began to report in secret. Multicolored light rose up in the area and concealed them. Outsiders couldn't hear or see them. In the distant mountain forest, Chu Feng was standing there quietly and gazing. Those people were within the folded space and were isolated by an invisible domain. Additionally, Chu Feng was circulating his ultimate breathing technique and merging himself with the heaven and earth. No matter how powerful they were, they couldn't sense him. "They're about to cross over. Time is of the essence." Chu Feng's gaze was cold. He had to make preparations to ensure that nothing went wrong. This group of people couldn't be allowed to enter Earth. He had to find a way to eliminate them all. Chu Feng could sense that these people were at an extremely high evolutionary level. As expected of the Imperial Court of Evolvers, it would be a great disaster if they were to attack at this stage. Imperial Court of Evolvers? How dare you look down on us and call us natives and dregs? I want to see what kind of expression you'll have when you're destroyed. Chu Feng's heart was filled with killing intent. Soon afterward, he saw Linoy walking over. Her steps were light and graceful as she headed toward the folded space. Chu Feng turned around and left without looking back. At this point, there was no point in hesitating. He had to think of a way to prepare some trump cards. It would be a disaster if he let those ferocious Imperial Court troops cross over. The consequences would be too horrible to contemplate. Chu Feng pondered as he walked out of Mount Lao. He was suffused with battle intent because he had some ideas. He was going to prepare for battle. Chapter 408. The emerald bamboo raft was sparkling and translucent. It was made from a mysterious plant called void bamboo. This type of bamboo was exceptionally rare and could soar into the sky. After being refined, it was an ideal material for making flying tools. Chu Feng stood on the emerald bamboo raft and injected dense energy into it. The raft immediately floated up and shot into the distance like a bolt of green lightning. At first, it was very bumpy and difficult to maintain balance. But after driving for a certain distance, Chu Feng quickly got used to it. He drove the bamboo raft as fast as lightning towards Jiangning City. This thing was indeed ridiculously fast. It was even faster than running on 2 feet and could reach 10 times the speed of sound. It was truly astonishing. Chu Feng stood on the bamboo raft high above the ground, hiding above the cloud. He truly experienced the wonders of flying in the sky and tunneling through the earth. He roamed the skies amidst the rosy morning clouds. In the end, he arrived at Jiangning from Mount Lao in half an hour and landed near Mount Zhijin. The entire journey was over 6,000 kilometers. Chu Feng felt that time was pressing. He had returned to improve himself and hoped to use this place to refine medicine and evolve once more. After staying on Mount Lao for a night, he didn't know if the ancient corpse in the vein beneath the extreme flame essence had fallen asleep again. This thing was too strange and terrifying. If it hadn't calmed down, it would be impossible to use the revered 8 trigrams furnace. At present, this area was very quiet and no one was wandering around. Chu Feng probed with his divine instincts and felt that the ground was still unstable. He couldn't help but frown. Was it impossible to refine medicine at the critical moment? Let's try absorbing the extreme flame essence. He took out the diamond chakram. Unlike the previous 2 times, he had absorbed the golden extreme flame essence. Finally, the snow-white diamond chakram absorbed a large amount of black energy. The intense extreme flame essence caused the diamond chakram to glow with a black light. It's still unstable after all. Chu Feng's heart trembled. He had sensed an indescribable restlessness underground. That thing hadn't completely fallen asleep. With a swoosh, Chu Feng steered the bamboo raft into the distance. He was decisive and resolute, not wasting any time. There are still a few days left. I hope it can fall asleep soon, Chu Feng muttered to himself. Since he couldn't refine medicine and couldn't evolve for the time being, he began to think about his future plans. Old man, I want to wash this place with nuclear bombs. Chu Feng contacted Lu Tong. This was throwing caution to the wind. As long as the people of the Great Qi dynasty dared to cross over, he would use a nuclear warhead at the critical moment to draw out the even more terrifying domain energy on Earth and kill them. Are you crazy? You want to use a nuclear bomb to wash the land? Lu Tong cried out in alarm. He had been lying low ever since he left the Hollow Jade Temple, but he did have a lot of resources in his hands. Previously, Lu Tong had sent people to hack away the authority of the 2 dark organizations to give orders on their behalf, directly using missiles to attack the aliens. Chu Feng needed their help because the enemy this time was unprecedentedly strong. He seriously suspected that it was an enemy of the carefree realm. He didn't hide anything from Lu Tong. In the end, the old man agreed and decided to contact his old subordinates to shine again. Especially when Lu Tong learned that the master of the Hollow Jade Temple was not around and had been killed by Chu Feng, he was even more confident. Following which, Chu Feng contacted a group of great demons from Mount Kunlun and asked for their help. They could take a trip to the surrounding regions, such as the peninsula region. There was no other reason. With their powerful strength, they could control some bases and, when the time came, use various thermal weapons to attack the folded space in the depths of Mount Lao. As long as the people of the Great Qi dynasty showed themselves, they would bombard indiscriminately and stimulate the defensive domains of Earth. This would increase their destructive power and wear them down to death. Last time, when Chu Feng was obstructing the descenders from the outer realm, those missiles had played a great role. In order to protect themselves, the extraterrestrials used powerful energy and, in the end, triggered a terrifying backlash from the domains in Earth's sky. At first, the great demons of Kunlun stared at each other and felt that they didn't know where to start. Only after a long while did they decide to make arrangements. Chu Feng sighed inwardly. If the two old hoodlums, the Black Yak and the Manchurian Tiger, were here, they would definitely be familiar with such method. They would definitely be able to complete the mission perfectly. At the same time, Chu Feng ordered the Bird King of Kunlun to go to Mount Lao to monitor and inform him immediately if there were any abnormal movements. He was really worried that the group of people would come out in advance. Once that happened, all the preparations would have been for nothing. Hence, he was rushing for time. Following which, Chu Feng contacted the old Grandmaster of Mount Wudong and asked him to go to Mount Longhu to invite the demoness sister or the goddess to come out of the mountain. If this sister wasn't bragging last time in Shuntian and really had a great background, what was there to fear about the great Qi prince? Even if it was a group of carefree realm soldiers, what was there to fear? They could probably be swatted to death. In order to eliminate the great Qi prince, Chu Feng was ready to throw caution to the wind. He had to prepare all kinds of backup plans to ensure that nothing would go wrong. He really wanted to kill them all. Afterwards, Chu Feng went into seclusion. He found a quiet and picturesque place to hide, and began to study domains. He had more than one book on domains in his hand. The first book he obtained could even be called a heavenly book because it contained a series of mature domain models. For instance, the weapon nurturing domain, attack domain, defense domain, etc., were all large-scale domains with perfect structures. As long as he could study them thoroughly and lay them out, they would be absolutely terrifying. Chu Feng naturally had his eyes on the attack domain. He threw himself into it wholeheartedly and began to comprehend it. Recently, he had gone to the True Dragon's lair at the Eye of the Eastern Sea and had also gone deep into the Qilin's old lair. He had truly experienced the mysteries of top-grade domains. This was extremely beneficial to him and stimulated all kinds of inspirations. As for broadening his horizons and true combat, there was no need to talk about it. Only by experiencing it personally would he be able to better understand. Before this, he had left his footprints in Mount Kunlun, Mount Wudong, the pilgrimage grounds, Mount Qinling, Mount Zhongnan, and Mount Huang. Chu Feng's attainments in the field of domains had increased rapidly. Now that he had reached a special checkpoint, he would definitely be able to lay out complex killing domains if he could advance one step further. He wanted to comprehend certain domain laws as soon as possible and then give the Great Qi dynasty a pleasant surprise on Mount Lao. He would wipe them all out. He had already gone to the depths of Mount Lao and understood the geography there. Now, he was constantly making deductions, preparations, and plans in order to draw out a terrifying killing power. That day, Lu Tong told him that there would be no problems. The old man also threw caution to the wind and told him that if he really wanted to go all out, it wouldn't be a problem to use nuclear bombs to wash the land. One day later, the old Lama was chanting Buddhist mantras while surging with killing intent as he told Chu Feng that there would be no problems on their side. They would go to the peninsula and other places, and when the time came, they would be bombarded by a rain of missiles. Apparently, the Mastiff King's humiliation had agitated the group of great demons on Mount Kunlun. Even the benevolent old Lama was immediately turned dark. "I'm truly sorry. This kind of work was originally suitable for Old Black and the Manchurian Tiger," Chu Feng said. "Buddha is merciful. Don't be polite. Kill, 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 kill," the old Lama replied. Chu Feng was speechless. Why did he feel that the old Lama had been possessed? Then, he began to concentrate on his research again. 2 days later, the old Grandmaster of Mount Wudong informed Chu Feng of a piece of bad news. Mount Longhu was completely silent and they couldn't find that mysterious lady. Chu Feng frowned. This mysterious lady was a key character and possessed unfathomable combat strength. If she were to take action, she would probably be able to slap them all to death. But the situation was terrible. They couldn't contact her at all after arriving at Mount Longhu. It seems we can only rely on ourselves. Chu Feng sighed. He wouldn't have asked for help if the situation wasn't so serious. But now, it seemed he couldn't count on them and could only rely on himself. It's better to rely on ourselves than others. Chu Feng continued to study domains and comprehend the killing diagram. If he could really lay it out, he would wipe out 60 to 70% of their forces, even if he couldn't wipe them all out. Those people were all ridiculously powerful and believed themselves to be extremely precious. But if they were to be slaughtered by the native in their eyes, their expressions before death would definitely be extremely marvelous. We need to hurry. That group of people might arrive at any moment. Chu Feng was feeling anxious. On the 3rd day, he made a breakthrough and gained some comprehension of the laws of domains. He had researched many things on a deeper level. During this period, some news began to spread. An imperial dynasty of evolvers has appeared and is about to cross over and descend upon Earth. That's a group of unimaginable experts. At this stage, no one can contend against them. They're a group of peerless existences. This news was released by people from the Qilins' old lair. It immediately caused a storm and caused people everywhere to become abnormally nervous. Imperial dynasty of evolvers? What kind of terrifying orthodoxy was this? They actually dared to call themselves an imperial dynasty. This kind of evolutionary sect was absolutely terrifying and a top-grade power. The people from the Qilins' old lair had gone to help Mu Qing and Mount Lao. Both parties had cooperated before, so they naturally knew the truth. This wasn't the only thing they leaked. They also mentioned that Chu Feng wasn't sensible and actually wanted to obstruct them. He had once succeeded in assassinating Mu Qing, but he wasn't on good terms with the imperial dynasty of evolvers and had an intense conflict. This further ignited a storm. Everyone was paying attention. Now that the imperial dynasty of evolvers was coming, how would Chu Feng deal with them? Everyone wanted to know, would he be able to survive? Would he be able to stop those colossal monsters? Even the most confident people sighed and revealed worried expressions. That was because the two sides weren't evenly matched. Carefree realm experts from the imperial dynasty of evolvers are about to descend. This is an unrivaled force. The people from the Qilins' old lair were descenders from the outer realms. Even they were speaking in such a manner, lowering their statuses and praising Chu Feng. This was enough to explain the situation. Everyone had a premonition that a storm was coming. An unprecedented tension pervaded the air and affected everyone's nerves. Would the unrivaled imperial dynasty of evolvers sweep through the world and sweep through the 8 desolates? Everyone was uncertain. Such a terrifying force was enough to shake one's soul. The people from the Qilins' old lair had expressed their feelings wrongly, and some people were so high-profile. This made the great Qi Prince Qiyu in the depths of Mount Lao extremely dissatisfied. He didn't want to be noticed, and hope had quietly arrived. "We'll go protect him." Some people from the Qilins' old lair were heading toward Mount Lao. It seemed they wanted to make amends for their mistake. Starting from Han Wenze and Huang Weiwei, they had cooperated with Mount Lao. Now that the great Qi prince was about to cross over, it was time for some people from the Qilins' old lair to perform. A storm was brewing. Presently, the entire world was filled with a tense and austere atmosphere. Everyone was quietly waiting for the violent storm. Chapter 409. The trees were verdant and the mountains weren't very tall. Birds would occasionally sing, but the mountains were even more tranquil. Chu Feng did a backflip and landed on the ground to express his excitement. He had comprehended a deeper level of domains and began to arrange them here to test the result. There were large amounts of magnetic stones in the spatial bottle, enough for him to squander freely. A small jade-like river meandered past the foot of the mountain and flowed into the distance. Before long, a great explosion occurred here and the ground caved in. The small river disappeared and flowed into a cave, following which the two short mountains disappeared. Chu Feng's face was covered in dirt as he drilled out from a crack in the distance. His clothes were tattered and he was in a sorry state, but his face was full of joy. He had laid out a simple killing domain and the results were extraordinary. His attainments in the field of domains had reached a whole new level and taken a big step forward. This was not only beneficial for the current battle but also for his exploration of the famed mountains. In the deepest part of Mount Lao, the ancient forest was overgrown with thistles and thorns. Within the folded space there was a somber atmosphere. The great Qi prince, Xia Yu, was extremely dissatisfied. News of his arrival had been leaked before he had even crossed over. This made him unhappy. The people from the Qilins' old lair felt somewhat uneasy and had come to apologize. They were the ones who had leaked the news. Today, they had come to protect him in hopes of making amends for their mistakes. You guys go patrol around Mount Lao. Report to me immediately if there's even the slightest sign of trouble. A commander within the folded space spoke as he sent the group away. It might not be an unintentional leak, said the old man with a medicinal basket on his back with a solemn expression. The great Qi prince, Xia Yu, nodded and gazed at the region outside the folded space. His eyes were brilliant as he said, "Perhaps there are enemies from the same planet as us. They shouldn't be worthy of being our enemies. I reckon they're just pawns who came here 22 years ago." A commander spoke with surging killing intent. He turned to look at the great Qi prince and asked for permission to go over first to clear a safe path. This was to prevent people from disturbing them when they crossed over. The metallic armor on Xia Yu's body lit up. He didn't agree and said, "The more powerful the entity, the more dangerous it is to set foot on this planet. You'll die without a doubt if you go over on your own." They had done in-depth research and found that following the Earth's recovery, the path into this world from other galaxies would gradually become safer. It was as if it was protecting the living beings on this planet. Beings that were too strong couldn't come over. He didn't even have the time to scream before turning into a pile of ashes. This caused everyone's expressions to turn ugly. We used up that protective sacred text while sending Mu Qing over. Now we don't have enough left. Someone sighed. They had already used up a fair amount of divine items along the way and were now somewhat lacking. Boom. The second person was even more straightforward. He had just stepped over when his body and soul were completely obliterated by the emerging domain patterns. This planet is mysterious and complicated. It was set up by our predecessors. Moreover, the planet's will hasn't died completely and is instinctively protecting us. The great Qi prince's expression was unsightly. These were his trusted aides. Many had died along the way and the ones left behind were all characters with great potential. In the end, they had fallen just like that in front of Earth space. In the end, this group of natives' evolution is too slow and their levels are too low. Otherwise, the planet's will would have long since allowed us to set foot here. A commander said coldly with a frosty gaze. His fingers had turned white from clenching them so tightly that 2 knights had died in succession. The third person charged through with a swoosh. His body was somewhat charred and had also been crushed by the domain patterns. However, he didn't die and managed to endure. Haha, good. The group of people at the back laughed loudly. They were incomparably excited and happy. That person staggered but stood up in the end. His injuries weren't too serious. He leapt up and soared 2 to 3 kilometers into the air to express his excitement. Thump! After landing, he knelt down on one knee and said, "I'm willing to protect your highness. Regardless of whether it's those inferior natives or other descenders with ulterior motives, I'll massacre them all if they dare act rashly." Very well. Within the folded space, many people were excited. One Mu Qing wasn't enough at all. With another night going over, things would be much more stable and they could prevent accidents. Chi. The fourth and fifth nights charged through one after the other, but in the end they all died. They were engulfed in flames and turned to ashes. This wasn't only related to one's bloodline, foundation, and level of evolution. It also depended on luck. At the very least, this knight who had successfully set foot on Earth didn't know how he had succeeded. "Your Highness, I'll go and look around. I'll be right back." Knight Yangheng, who had successfully stepped out of the folded space, turned around and left. Afterward, he turned into a bolt of silver lightning and moved rapidly. This person was very powerful and was an expert at the shackled realm. He was patrolling the entire Mount Lao area. Before long, he saw the few people from the Qilin lair who had come to join them. He immediately went around them. Very soon, he saw another group of people hiding in the dark and seemed to be plotting something. "There really are blind pawns," Knight Yangheng said coldly. Afterward, he dived down from a mountain peak like a supersonic bomber. Chi! Within a split second, the silver blade in his right hand swept out like a waterfall, cutting through boulders, splitting open hills, and destroying the entire forest with incomparably dazzling radiance. Someone immediately let out a miserable cry as he was cut in half at the waist. Clang, 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 a great battle broke out here. Moments later, 4 of the 5 beings from the Qilin lair were killed. One of them was captured alive and was lifted up by Yangheng. "You lot dare to oppose the imperial court? Even the masters behind you won't stand a chance when they truly descend. They'll all be eliminated." Yangheng left with the only living captive. Before long, he returned to the folded space and tossed the captured person onto the ground. Immediately, someone went to interrogate him. "Have you gone to see Mu Qing?" the Prince of Great Qi asked. "Yes, she has. After receiving treatment from Your Highness Divine Medicine, Mu Qing has regrown her severed limbs and has more or less recovered. She has been with young Miss Lin these days," Yangheng replied. Following which, he revealed an indescribably excited expression and reported in a whisper, "According to Mu Qing's careful observation, the energy pagoda within young Miss Lin's body might be an object left behind by a 5-star imperial court. It might even be more mysterious." "What?" At this moment, not to mention the knights and commanders, even the Prince of Great Qi, Xia Yu, was astonished. This was definitely an astonishing piece of news. A 5-star imperial court could be considered a colossus even in the vast starry skies. This kind of orthodoxy's foundations were too deep, and their inheritances were boundlessly terrifying. If one could truly obtain the energy pagoda's inheritance, they could completely recreate the Great Qi dynasty. Moreover, the imperial court's energy pagoda on Earth could be used once a year to open a safe passage to receive large armies. "Congratulations, Your Highness! You're destined to become a saint on this planet. When the time comes, you'll return in glory. The curtains of glory have already been drawn. It seems Your Highness is the heavens chosen. Who can contend against you?" At this time, Chu Feng had already come out of seclusion. He had comprehended another important part of the killing domain and could already deploy a simplified version of the killing domain. At present, its destructive power should be sufficient. In truth, he couldn't continue comprehending at this time. Progress in this domain required inspiration and a long period of analysis. There was no time to waste. The Wudong Grandmaster and the old Lama of Mount Kunlun had arrived and met up with him. Chu Feng produced a number of silver pills and directly handed them to the most powerful ones. He told them that this would allow them to undergo a super evolution and sever their 8th shackle. These people were astonished. They hadn't even severed their 7th shackle, and they had already obtained such priceless treasured medicines? It was like a dream. In the end, the old Grandmaster Wu Qifeng and the old Lama broke through and became experts with 8 severed shackles. Their strength increased explosively. As for the others, they regretfully couldn't cross the heavenly moat. They only managed to sever their 7th shackle and pass a checkpoint. Afterwards, Chu Feng, the old Lama, and the old Grandmaster joined hands and tore off the silver chain on the Mastiff King's neck, allowing him to completely recover. The Mastiff King also broke through after taking a silver pill and became an expert with 8 severed shackles. On Mount Lao, Mu Qing was smiling from the bottom of her heart. She touched the energy pagoda with her own hands and felt her spirit throbbing. She felt a distant and majestic aura which made her tremble with excitement. You actually let me touch it and feel the supreme crystallization of the dynasty of evolvers. I'm incomparably honored. She spoke respectfully and bowed to Linhui. This time, it wasn't out of politeness but sincere joy. Linhui was calm and calm. She nodded slightly and said, "You can construct that safe passage now." Chapter 410. There was a mistake in the previous chapter. It should be Chiyu, not Xiaoyu. Mount Lao was verdant and glistening with spirit waterfalls. In addition to the lingering immortal mist and white cranes hovering in the air, this place resembled an immortal residence. In truth, this place used to be a holy land for evolution. There's still no movement. Chu Feng and the others had arrived, but they kept a good distance to avoid being discovered. In front of the silver pine tree, Mu Qing was both excited and delighted. In the end, she bade farewell to Linhui, saying that she was going to inform the great Qi prince and the others to make preparations. They were going to construct the altar and connect it to the energy pagoda. It's that woman. She's actually recovered? Chu Feng was astonished. He saw Mu Qing walking through the mountain ridges, her body intact. One had to know that he had personally crippled Mu Qing several days ago. Now, her limbs had actually grown back? Even though the Mastiff King was usually calm and heroic, he could hardly control himself at this moment. His hair was dancing wildly and his eyes were bloodshot. He seemed about to explode. How could he forget the extraordinary humiliation from several days ago? This woman had tied a slender dog leash around him after suppressing him and walking him on the street. Don't be anxious. The Wudong Grandmaster Wu Qifeng spoke. He placed a hand on the Mastiff King's shoulder to calm his anger. Chu Feng also consoled the Mastiff King. I don't know what method she used to recover, but it doesn't matter. When the time comes, we'll just cut off her arm. Since her recovery ability is quite good, we'll just maim her a few more times. That makes sense. The Horse King shook his shiny bald head and said, Brother Mastiff, this will help you vent your anger. When you capture her, just chop her up. People from the Qilin's old lair had appeared. They were the ones who had defected to the great Qi prince and wanted to protect him during his crossing over. However, they had been sent out to patrol the mountain. Chu Feng frowned after discovering them. You guys withdraw first. I'll go take a look. He had grasped an ultimate breathing technique which allowed him to merge his body and spirit into nature. At the same time, he could approach a state of nirvanic death. Ordinary people would find it difficult to discover him. Mu Qing's steps were light and graceful. She walked very cheerfully because the exciting moment was not far away. This group of people from the great Qi dynasty were not about to cross over. Success was right in front of their eyes. If they could descend on Earth as a whole, they would become one of the strongest teams. They would far surpass the people from many galaxies and possess formidable competitiveness. Your Highness. Mu Qing arrived at the folded space and knelt down to thank Qiyu for saving her life. Then, she told him the good news. That energy pagoda belongs to at least a 5-star evolutionary dynasty, maybe even more extraordinary. Everyone was moved. The energy pagoda was the proof of a dynasty's glory and the crystallization of blood, sweat, and tears. It would only be condensed when a dynasty was on the verge of destruction. After that, it would hide itself from the world and wait for the future to shine, hoping to rise again. Mu Qing informed him that there was nothing wrong with that energy pagoda. It released exuberant life force, helping Linoy refine the various modeled energies that entered her body. The energy pagoda of a 5-star evolutionary dynasty is not simple. When it condenses the essence of a glorious orthodoxy, it will shake the world and devour everything within its territory. One must obtain the approval of the planet's will in order to succeed. Qiyu's expression was solemn. It was also because of this that the energy pagoda within Linoy's body was a priceless treasure. It had once obtained the approval of the Earth's will and could naturally receive beings from the outer realms. Take a bath, change your clothes and build the altar, the great Qi prince instructed. This wasn't just a formality but a sacred ceremony. There were hints in the former wise men's notes that the energy pagoda of a 5-star evolutionary dynasty needed to be treated with respect. The prince has grasped a peerless secret volume in the field of control. As long as we can come into contact with that energy pagoda, it won't be difficult to make it change owners, an old man said with a smile. We must be cautious. What I've grasped is only an incomplete volume. Qiyu didn't dare to be careless. They were constructing the altar in this area using special stone materials. The progress wasn't fast and could even be said to be relatively slow. That was because it seemed to be a manifestation of some kind of ceremony and simply couldn't be sped up. Even the great Qi prince was participating in the process. In the distance, Chu Feng was baffled. This group of people was like an old ox pulling a cart. They were excessively slow. Were they building a stove over there? He estimated that it would take them at least until tomorrow after they had piled up all the stone materials on the ground. At the same time, he keenly noticed a knight who could enter and exit the folded space. He had successfully charged through the death trial just like Mu Qing. I don't care what you guys want to do or what crafty plots you have. When the time comes, I refuse to believe you guys can endure a nuclear bombardment and detonate the Earth's domains. Chu Feng muttered to himself. Everything had been prepared. All that was left was this group of people to cross over. But he still felt vaguely uneasy because this group of people was too serious. Even the great Qi prince was devoutly building the altar and moving together with everyone else. Chu Feng stood there for a long time. He was calculating and deducing how to arrange his killing domain and how to kill this group of people in the most effective way. Will it be too late to ask the great demons of Mount Kunlun to listen to my orders and throw the magnetic stones at me at the critical moment? He frowned slightly. That was because the offensive domain he wanted to set up, even if it was a simplified version, would still need to implant many magnetic stones underground. It would affect the destructive power if any of the links were to go wrong. Afterwards, Chu Feng retreated from Mount Lao and met up with the great demons of Mount Kunlun. I reckon there's still one more day before they try to cross over, said Chu Feng. Afterwards, they went into hiding and didn't want to be discovered. Chu Feng frowned as he pondered about the offensive domain. The efficiency wouldn't be high if he were to set it up at the last minute. Moreover, the power would be seriously affected if a single magnetic stone was implanted incorrectly. Can it be integrated? Suddenly, Chu Feng noticed a certain object and fished out 4 brass pillars from the spatial bottle. These were the dragon locking pillars he had obtained from the Black Serpent Crown Prince of the Southern Sea Dragon race. This is an integrated domain that can replace piles of magnetic crystals and jade stones. Following which, Chu Feng was shaken. He opened his fiery eyes and gazed at them attentively while using his hands to feel around the 4 pillars. He already knew that these pillars were called the dragon-locking pillars. Chu Feng felt that he had neglected something before. They weren't called the ghost-hitting wall pillars but the dragon-locking pillars. He studied them in detail, and his eyes were like lightning as he discovered some clues. In the end, he used a special domain technique to activate some runes which extended out from within the pillars. The dragon-locking pillars. This thing can lock a flood dragon once it's completely awakened. Chu Feng was astonished. Then, his heart burned with passion as he began to study it in depth. At night, Chu Feng put down the pillars with great confidence. Although he couldn't bring out the true might of the dragon-locking pillars, it was still more powerful and convenient to trap and ambush people than to set up a temporary domain. The 4 pillars were an integrated form of a certain domain. Now that Chu Feng had studied them, it wouldn't be as simple as ghost-hitting wall pillars when he used them again. Early in the morning, golden clouds gushed out and the morning sun was resplendent. The rising sun carried with it an intense vitality as it jumped out from the sea. The whole of Mount Lao also became auspicious with rising clouds and rosy clouds. On the spiritual peak, Linoy's clothes were as white as snow. She was peerlessly beautiful as she bathed in the morning glow and gazed calmly at the sea. Her beautiful eyes were profound as she said softly, "There's not much time left." The sun rose, and the whole of Mount Lao was comfortably warm. The density of vitality and energy was quite high. In the end, Mu Qing arrived with an excited expression and invited Lin. Chu Feng also set out. That was because the mutant bird circling in the sky had alerted him that there was some movement in the folded space. He didn't allow anyone to follow him before leaving and warned, "I can go in by myself. In a while, you guys follow my hand signal and let the people outside carry out my orders." This was something they had discussed beforehand. Chu Feng's different hand signals represented different meanings. Perhaps it was a nuclear bombardment, or perhaps it was a rain of missiles. All of them were terrifying, murderous, intense. Of course, there was also the last hand signal. That was failure and escape quickly. Within the folded space, the dozens of people from the Great Qi dynasty were all prepared. They stood in front of the altar and prepared to cross over into the real earth. The energy pagoda of the 5-star imperial court will allow us to pass through the death trial without any worries. From now on, the sea will be vast and the sky will be high. This planet will become our land of fortune. How can those natives compete with us? Her Highness is the heaven's chosen one and is destined to become a saint here. These people were very excited. Some of them were whispering and looking forward to the moment they crossed over. Afterwards they saw Mu Qing and also that otherworldly white-clothed lady. She was surrounded by a halo of light amidst the morning glow and was emitting divine splendor. Even those arrogant and unruly knights were slightly absent-minded. They stared at the exceptional beauty who seemed to have walked out from a painting and no longer spoke. They had a sense of superiority towards the creatures on this declining planet. They believed that the natives here had long since been eliminated and that they were the descendants of the group of losers from the glorious era. Their bloodlines were already thin and impure, and their glory was gone forever. They had already been reduced to the lowest race and should be looked down upon. But now they were all absent-minded. They suddenly felt that this lady was so pure and holy that it made them feel ashamed of their inferiority. The great Qi imperial prince had an imposing appearance. He moved and walked to the boundary of the folded space and fixed his gaze on Lin. Although this wasn't the first time they had met, he had never been so moved as he was now. He revealed a warm smile and conversed with Linoy. Linoy smiled faintly. Her good etiquette education allowed her every word and action to be natural and appropriate. In the distance, Chu Feng frowned. He had already raised one of his hands, and the mutant birds of Kunlun were watching him attentively. As long as he swung down his arm, this place would suffer a destructive attack. Chu Feng was backing away, putting a safe distance between himself and Lin Naoi. The hand that was raised in the air stiffened. He thought of what Lin Naoi had told him: trust her. She would not harm him. Finally, an astonishing change took place in the folded space. An energy pagoda appeared. Its vast and distant aura covered the sky and earth. Afterward, it enlarged and stretched across Mount Lao. Half of it squeezed into the folded space and enveloped the altar. In the end, it covered everyone from the great Qi imperial family. It was like a safe passage that brought them across the border. Mu Qing was standing guard at the side. At this moment, she was screaming in joy and couldn't help but want to sing at the top of her lungs. Yang Heng was also excited and let out a long whistle. Chu Feng's pupils widened as his hand was about to fall down. But at this time, the pagoda was evenly divided into two halves from the top to the base. Ah no! The knights were screaming and their mounts were howling in pain. The moment they were exposed to the world, their bodies surged with blazing flames. Bang! A powerful knight commander was the first to explode and turn into ashes amidst the flames. Your Highness quickly used the supreme secret chapter of the controller domain, an old man shouted. In the end, he also exploded and was burned to ashes. Ah no! Balls of flames rose up one after another, and some even directly exploded like dazzling fireworks. Don't! Someone was startled and frightened. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.